Good afternoon. If I could just have a brief word before we start officially. I just wanted to mention that, as you've seen, reception is being refurbished. To point out, this is part of the normal capital expenditure looking after the building. It'll take a couple of months to complete, so it may be completed by your meeting at the end of January. And just to apologise for the inconvenience. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks for that. We'll open the meeting and first of all must welcome the new councillor Jess Stokes from Claycross, and welcome to the meeting. Hope you enjoy it. Right, we'll get on with the agenda then. First item is apologies for absence. Alex. Thanks for that. Tony Lacey, did you want to speak?
Yes, I've got apologies from Councillor Beach, Durrant and Smith. Michael Smith.
Thanks. Any more apologies?
Yes, Chair. Those two as
Oh,
well.
we've had some more apologies handed in. As you said, Mick Smith and Pat Antcliffe. Any other apologies? No. Thanks for that then. Next item is item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interests not already on their register of interest in any items on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Any declarations of interest? Oh, Alex there.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think it's not a prejudicial interest. It's just, I think it's widely known I've got a farming background back in Lincolnshire, which is relevant to the motion. I don't believe that prohibits me from having an involvement in the motion.
Okay, thanks for that. Charlotte?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to declare a note on item 7, the Whiteleas paper. Obviously, in my role at DCC, I have been sort of aware of this. So my proposal, dependent on the monitoring officer's views, was to just remain in the room, but because it's not a sort of financial interest or anything like that, but probably not to speak or vote on it, if that's all.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? Nigel Barker?
Just for clarity, really, I'm not sure whether being the chair at Parish Council in North Wingfield gives me any prejudicial interest in that road. But just to note that I'll take advice on that, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. No, the report is about the financing, so I wouldn't have said you had any significant other interest, but we'll note down what you said.
Thank you.
Any other declarations of interest?
Similar one, maybe.
Jane Barry?
Yes, Chair, it's similar to... No, I'm using the wrong one, sorry. Same reasons as Nigel Barker, but if Sarah can make note of that for me, please.
Thanks for that. Annette Hill?
Chair, I think Annette Hill is trying to masquerade as Councillor Stuart Fawcett, but I can confirm at no point have I ever been or ever will be Annette Hill. But it may reflect in this if that continues to be used on this card. I don't know if anyone from technical services can assist. Just wanted to bring that, beyond any shadow of a doubt.
Welcome, Annette.
Well, thanks for that. Any other declarations of interest? If not, I'll move on to minutes of the last meeting, item 3, to approve as a correct record and the chair to sign the attached minutes of the council meeting on 23rd of September. Can we all approve these minutes?
Move it, Chair.
Are they seconded?
Second, yeah.
All those in favour of the minutes of the last meeting, yep. Anybody against? Two against. Helen Weatherall and Andrew Cooper. Oh, okay.
Just for clarification, I did send my apologies.
Okay, we'll get them added. Thanks for that. Item 3, Chair's announcement. That's me. We've already welcomed Jess Stokes to the meeting. I will just say a former councillor, some of us knew, Terry Smith, a Conservative. Some of the old ones might remember him or not. He died recently at the age of 87. He was the leader of the Conservatives on the district and at the town council, and he was a mayor of the town council in 1990, and he did insult me a few times, but we managed to get on eventually, and I do know his family, and we do send condolences to the family who are left. So I thought I would just mention that. Another item I must mention is I've decided to ask for any donations to the local food banks, and I've left a box somewhere in the room if anybody wants to put anything in or monetary donations. They'd be welcome, and in a week or two I will take these along with the stuff that the staff have also donated in the rooms along the corridor. I see there's quite a lot of stuff there which is really good and will help the local food banks along. So that's just a request of mine. And then we'll just say I've been fairly busy out and about. I've been to Marsh Lane, Macmillan Coffee Morning at Green Lawns. That was quite enjoyable. Grassmore Country Park. The locals have spent a lot of time, probably a few years, applying for grants, and they've made a new walkway in the park, so I was asked to open that. That was very pleasurable. I went to Wingerworth Art Group exhibition, been to Eckington Food Pantry, Claycross Food Bank, Ridgeway Sports and Social Club, an Armed Forces Fair, a Jobs Fair at Killamarsh. We went to a Remembrance Parade at Dromfield on November the 10th, and I think last week I went over to Dromfield Baptist Church to the children's play group. Enjoyed them all, enjoyed meeting lots of volunteers, and look forward to doing many more, and hopefully the snow will stay away and we can all get round. Thanks for that, and I think that's all my chair's announcements. Oh, the only other one is that at the end of the meeting I believe somebody's coming from the police to tell us how to look after councillor security. It's a bit late now after the general election, but maybe it'll be useful in the future. So I'll move on to item 5, Leader of the Council's announcements, Nigel Barker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I'd like to pass on my welcome to Jess, and I hope you have enjoy your time at the council. Since the last meeting, I've been really busy. I've been out and about. I think like I said last time, that we really enjoy some success locally at what we do at the council, but I think the greater success lies we're working with others. And we've been developing relationships, haven't we, Lee, as we different organisations. I'll be having a meeting with the ICB, the Integrated Care Board for Derby and Derbyshire in the new year. And so I could say, through meetings like these, we really aim to improve services for people in our district. I've also been working with the new Mayor, Claire Ward, and the team at MCA. You all know what that means. Along with other councils and organisations, as the planning phase of regional strategy development is beginning. It's really moving at a pace now, I think. We attended the MCA summit at ProAct at Chesterfield Football Ground, and we looked at systems leadership and thinking. And it's an approach I know you're really keen on, Lee, into how we get all that and developing a regional growth strategy, and we want to be part of that. We also met with MK officers recently following the suggestion that MK might want to develop this regional talent pipeline. And I know, again, Lee, I don't want to big you up too much, but it's something that you've been working on for a long while. that it's about this recruitment and retention at local government, and we're trying to extend that, the work that Lee's done, on a regional basis, and they were really keen on that, weren't they? They actually want to carry on talking to us, and so to that development, I'm looking for that, it's over there, that thing, roll that out. And like I say, on this working together thing, we've had a bit of a delay with the Strategic Leadership Board, but we did have a meeting in here last week with all the district and borough leaders, and also Derby City. They were on the screen. So again, I chaired that, and I think that's going to be a key forum going forward, isn't it? So we've got a strategic body for all the councils in Derbyshire to come together. So we reduce duplication. It's a one single place when we're looking at integrating all the economic development stuff and things like that. So I'm really keen that we develop that and keep it going. On another topic, we met with the LGA last Tuesday. That was a good meeting, wasn't it? She was good. To view the council undertaking as a corporate peer challenge next summer. I think this will be really valuable exercise. It's a peer team will be appointed where the elected members and officers come in and have a look at what we do. So they'll be in for 4 days. I think it's a really robust challenge, and it's something that we can learn from. I know we think we're perfect, but I don't think we're just not quite there yet. So, but we'll keep you posted on that. I also attended the LGA conference in Harrogate at the end of October, and the main message I got from that was I think the new government fully get the importance of local government, and they appear to be fully committed to working with councils to deliver their objectives. I think that the message is we've got to deliver a lot of this stuff that they want, the houses and all the other stuff. So that were a good thing. The caveat to that is they've not found a magic money tree anywhere. So some of the decisions that are announced in the budget, and I'm sure we'll get onto them in a bit, Alex. Can't wait. And finally, I think just to update, I'm pleased to say the construction on Claycross Active is back underway. We had a cabinet meeting last week where we decided, where we were introduced to Universal Civils and Build, who talked us through the remainder of the project. And you may have seen on public communication stating an early summer opening. Of course, we're all doing we can to open as soon as possible, and we'll provide an opening date closer to the time. Whilst the financial impact to the council is still unknown due to the external funding decisions, we can't lose sight of the wider impact of the ISG demise. ISG were the sixth biggest construction company in the UK. When ISG went into administration in September, they held 23 live public sector contracts worth an estimated cumulative value of 1.16 billion. So that's a big company. Sadly, many thousands of people lost their jobs, and the supply chain faces losses of 190 million, causing many of the subcontractors and businesses to fail. So it's not just affected us in North East Derbyshire, it's a national concern. And some of the suggested reasons for failure were a combination of loss-making contracts, a failed company sale, and the financial legacy of the pandemic. That's all we can really say. And I will say that our officers, working with Alliance Leisure and this new company, have worked really tirelessly in the background to get us where we are today. I think, luckily, we were a long way on the project. If it had been 2 months earlier, we'd had a swimming pool full of snow, and because there wouldn't have been a roof on the place. So we are in a position where we can complete that project, and so that's where we're at. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you for that lengthy update, Nigel. Item 6 is public participation in accordance with the Council Procedure number 8 to allow members of the public to ask questions about the Council's activities for up to a period of up to 15 minutes. I think no questions have been submitted under Procedure Rule number 8 for this meeting, and there's no public in the room at the present time, so we'll move on to item 7, Housing Development Scheme, Whiteleas Avenue, North Wingfield, and I think Councillor Kerry's going to speak to this. Councillor Kerry.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval for borrowing to fund essential works required on the development site at Whiteleas Avenue, North Wingfield, under section 278 agreement with the Derbyshire County Council. Borrowing for the North Wingfield development was previously approved by council, which included an allowance for 278 works. The additional works are needed to improve the condition of Whiteleas Avenue up to a standard that will meet the legal requirements of the section 278 agreement with the Derbyshire County Council. The scale and technical specifications of the required works have been agreed with Derbyshire County Council, the cost of which has been independently verified and stands at £849,000. At its meeting on the 24th of October, Cabinet agreed to proceed subject to the approval of funding. The additional borrowing requirement of .0849 being the total borrowing requirement for the scheme of £12,084,000. Approval of borrowing is not a delegated function to the Council Constitution, and therefore it is a decision of the Council. The implications of the additional borrowing required must be taken in light of the CIPFA Prudential Code of Capital Finance. We must be satisfied that the borrowing is prudent, affordable and sustainable, and the viability undertaken demonstrates that this scheme meets the requirements of the Code. Should the borrowing be approved, the capital programme borrowing limits and capital financing requirements will need to be increased, along with the authorised limit and operational boundaries for the borrowing. The recommendations are that we do borrow, the Council approves the inclusion of the additional scheme and the HRA capital, and the Council approves the revised capital finance requirements, operational boundary and authorised limit as set out in the final implications of this report. Chair, I'll take questions, and I'll also move the recommendations 1 to 4.
1 to 3.
Sorry, 1 to 3.
Is it seconded, that? Seconded. Any questions and comments about the recommendations 1 to 3? Councillor Neil Baker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that report. This was touched on briefly in the scrutiny committee, which I was involved in last week. And following that, I went to have a look at the estate myself, and this damage is severe, very severe. There are a number of road plates all over the place, holes have been filled. So I have a few questions, if you wouldn't mind, please.
You ought to live there.
Yes, was the section 7278 agreement signed before works commenced? Why was the section 278 agreement not part of the pre-start planning conditions? You've already touched on the fact that it's been independently verified, the amount, but was the figure, how has the figure been arrived at? Is that the limit of the expenditure that's likely to be incurred? Is the allowance for any damage to services or drainage in the roads? And what contractual arrangements are in place vis-a-vis who is the contractor, who is the contract administrator, project manager, and is there not any liability that can be sought from that direction? Thank you.
Pat Kerry.
Jane, would you please come in on that?
Does, Lee, did you want to indicate?
No, I would
Oh,
just
sorry,
just indicate,
Jane,
Jane.
do you want to come in?
With your permission, Chair, I'll take those questions. Councillor Baker, could you give them me in order, please? Because there were quite a few there and I've scribbled some of them down, but if you could, I'll answer them in order if that's okay.
First one was a Section 278 agreement signed before works commenced?
No, so the Section 278 is a negotiation period, so you have an initial discussion and they start right at the start of the contract or at the start of the development, but then there's a negotiation period, and it was during that period that the work started and then the road significantly deteriorated.
Oh. And so why was the signing of the Section 278 not a pre-start condition then?
I'm afraid I don't have that detail to hand today, Councillor Baker. I can, as you'll appreciate, Ricknord Homes are managing this scheme on our behalf, so I can get that information for you.
And following on from that, what contractual arrangements are in place for delivering this project?
As I've just explained, Ricknord Homes manage this on behalf of the council. They're directly contracting with the contractor on site, so they will have a contract in place with Countryside Partnerships who are delivering the scheme.
And is there an independent administrator of this contract, or is that being done?
Yes, so Ricknord Homes will have their own cost consultant, so to speak, so they'll have a client function. So there's a JCT, a formal design and build contract in place with Countryside Partnerships, and then they will be doing their own cost consultancy within the team. I don't know if they use an external cost consultant or they do that themselves. I think it's a little bit of both, but yes, it's all independently verified.
Thank you. And the report indicates that the 849,000, which is a not insignificant amount of money, has been independently verified. Does that include any likely additional costs, such as damage to drainage or services that might be found when the road is actually opened up for repair?
There we go, sorry about that. So my understanding is that the development's significantly underway now. A lot of the houses are up, but part of the Section 278 is we need to sign that agreement before we can sell or let any of the properties. So a lot of that exploratory work has already taken place. So we're at the point whereby we can say with relative confidence that this is the final figure that we're going to have to spend on the road. The initial assessment when the 278 works were negotiated was a lower figure, and that's hence why we're having to come back today.
Jane, I've got a few names up here. The next one is William Jones.
Thank you, Chair. A very good report financially, excellent. But with my experience going back many years, I'm quite concerned about the way in which this contract is being looked at. To my mind and my experience, the damage occasioned to the road is normally the contractor's responsibility. It is due to the way that he constructed the works and therefore went over the roads. So I fail to see how this can be an extra, a claim. Under any contract situation, the claim is evaluated by the engineer. Has this been done? Has this claim been looked at logically and looked at from the point of view of the contract? Thank you.
Camera's moving about. We've seen everyone's shoes anyway.
Is your microphone working, Jane?
It is now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yes, so in answer to your question, Councillor Jones, so the contractor, there is a liability for the contractor to do so much. We have had external legal advice, we have reviewed the contract. It is legally compliant, and this is our liability as the developer to meet these additional costs.
Thank you.
So we've had William. Next, I think I've got down Helen Weatherall. Thanks. Not sure if I'm on
feel that this is a failure in the project management scoping and the initial work that was done to plan out this whole programme. Works.
Thank you, Chair. We've asked ourselves that question a lot, Councillor Weatherall. We don't believe so. We believe that when the initial exploratory works were carried out as part of the contract and we lifted the lid off the road, a reasonable assessment was made as to how much was needed. And then, as we've discovered, as the heavy rollers started to go in, it deteriorated quite significantly. So we don't believe so, but lesson learned.
Thanks for that. Next, we've got, well, Alex Dale, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, just similar concerns to Councillor Jones and Councillor Baker with this. I think I accept all of what James said, but it does feel like that mistakes have been made with this, because it feels very wrong that we as the client are being asked to dig into our pockets, or actually the taxpayers' pockets, to put right significant damage that, from all I can see, has been caused by the developer, the contractor, if you like, the subcontractor, and how that contract was set up in the first place does need looking at. I mean, there's no denying we can't be back in this situation again in future. We've got other schemes coming forward, Stonebroom being one. We don't want to be in this situation again. And I just really struggle to understand the accountability point, whether that sits with Ricknold as contractor or with the subcontractor. But either way, it does feel very wrong that we're coming back to the council to fund the mistake, if you like. So we need to really look very closely at these processes, at contracts, at planning conditions in particular, to ensure that we have Section 278 agreements, enforced before we get to this stage of churning up the road. So I think on the basis of that, while we support, I think we recognise we're in a situation that we're in, and we don't want North Wingfield to suffer with these roads for any longer than they have to. But I think from our group's perspective, we're a bit concerned about approving this report on the basis of the information in front of us, and I think we would ask that it's deferred so that we can have a more in-depth briefing, whether that's a cross-party group that comes together, looks at this more properly, or whether we have an all-members briefing or something like that, just to really get under the skin of it, because it just feels like it's the report in front of us, while, as William said, good financially, it doesn't contain a lot of the answers to a lot of the questions, and I think probably quite a few of us would like to get under the skin of it a bit more to ensure that we do learn those lessons moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
There we go. In answer to some of Councillor Dale's questions, the liability is clearly the developers. So to Section 8 responsibility is the council as the developer for this scheme. So we've checked that out. We're comfortable that that is the case. In terms of the decision that's being taken here today at council, and I'll defer to the monitoring officer on this, it is just to approve the borrowing or not, and not to explore the details of the report into the road and the condition of the road. That was an executive decision.
I don't know what the microphones are doing, but the next person I had on the list was Richard Wilton.
Thank you, Chair. Things seem to be a bit funny at the moment. Very You're on now. Am I on? Great. Okay. Thank you. I'll start again. Very concerned. £849,000 is a lot of money, part of an overall capital overspend of 1.849 million. We spend hundreds of thousands of pounds on a management structure at Ricknold, one I've always traditionally supported for various reasons, but this is a lot of money. I don't accept this is just a financing Treasury question, because you do go into the heart of what is the relationship between the council, Ricknold, the management oversight, particularly on this sort of aspect, and the subcontractors. One example of this, there's a very, very light paper. It doesn't give any real alternative options other than a reduction in the number of houses that you build. For example, could it be that the scheme is sold on to another developer that will produce just as many social affordable housing, but is able to execute the project better? That's not in here. The sale value is not in here. We've no idea how it's affected the financial model. No details have been given. And you know, who actually is responsible? This is a lot of money. So I agree with the Conservative group and Councillor Dale. I think what would be beneficial, there's a lot here, there is a lot here, and it goes to with future schemes as well. And looking back, if we look back at what happened with Woodheads, with the joint venture partner there, if we look at the overspends that happened at Sharley Park, I think we really do, and I think the best way to me either would be some form of cross-party sort of working group where we can have a look at some of these agreements and describe how these relationships are working, because this money is going to affect online front services elsewhere. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair. A couple of points, really. Are you able to advise me what the professional standing of the independent verifier was? Was he an engineer? Was he a legal person? Was he a quantity surveyor? Okay, second question is, I acknowledge that the claim has been reviewed legally.
It never stops you normally.
Am I still speaking?
Yes, I'm giving you the chance to, and hopefully this is your last point.
Thank you, Chair. But my last point was, are you able to advise on the professional standing of the independent verifier? Okay, second point is, I think the overall contract arrangement for delivery of projects of this size certainly needs to be overviewed, and I think I endorse Mr. Councillor Welton's comment for a cross-party working group. Thank you.
Another good use of government money. Yeah, £250,000 for something that isn't working. Yeah. Great.
I think it's because it's the back and forth, isn't it? That's the Am I? Yeah, but we're waiting for Sarah to speak on it.
And hopefully it'll come on.
It's on.
Brilliant. I just wanted to remind members that the reason this report is before you is for the borrowing and the capital consequences of the decision. The decision as to what to do is not your decision, that is for Cabinet. If you wish to look at the things, some of the things you're suggesting, the way to do that is to bring it up in the relevant scrutiny committee. So the report before you is solely about the borrowing. I just wish to remind you. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Ross Shipman.
Thank you, Chair. Whilst the decision today might be about whether we borrow the money or not, surely the monitoring officer would appreciate that whether we agree to borrow the money is whether we are confident that it's going to be spent wisely rather than it being wasted on contracts and other agreements which are going to deteriorate as well. So, yes, it's about the money, but as councillors, we're supposed to take into account all the facts so we can make an informed decision on whether we think we should borrow the money or not. So giving us half a story is not an acceptable position to be putting all us councillors in when you're borrowing the best part of £1 million. Is it? And actually, if you go through this report, it doesn't mention the fact that it was to do with a mistake over the quality of the road. That came up by pure chance because we stumbled over it in the Service to Scrutiny Committee when we queried a line in the medium-term financial plan. So, and then it came to light that it was about the deterioration of the road. Nowhere in this report does it say that mistake has happened. In fact, it starts with, it's to fund essential works to complete the full development. Not that we're redoing works which we'd already done And I think that that is quite disingenuous of the administration not to actually make that clear to us in the first place. So, can we vote this through? I don't really know, because I feel like I don't have enough information as to whether I believe Rick Neld or the contractor is going to deliver this project to the quality that we and Derbyshire County Council are expecting. And I think, like Councillor Dale says, this really should be deferred so we can have more information presented to us to make that informed decision.
Thanks for that. Jane Dethick going to come in.
To clarify, first of all, it isn't a mistake. This is part of the development. The works were done, and then it was identified that the further works needed to be done. There wasn't works that had already been done. This is part of the road being done at the time. We aren't going back and doing the road again. We've identified that works needed to be done as part of a standard 278 negotiation, which is ongoing and has now been agreed with the County Council, and the extra works that need to be done as a result of some of the heavy traffic. We're not denying that point. Some of the heavy traffic has made the situation worse, and that is part of the development. This is development risk. This is what happens when you decide to build houses. So you do take risks on. This time the road is particularly badly damaged, and absolutely, you know, 849,000 is an awful lot of money. I absolutely understand that. But I do want to make the point that this is not going back and covering a mistake or being disingenuous. This is part of the 278 negotiation, and the road is in a worse state than when those negotiations started out. So I just wanted to make that point clear, Chair.
Thanks for that. David Hancock.
Thank you, Chair. I think before we start being preached at, I think everybody has actually got the point. We haven't got enough information here to make a decision. You're asking us to put our names to borrowing an additional almost £1 million. I think it was Councillor Weldon, and I apologise to him if it wasn't, pointed out we've been in this position before with Northwood and various other organisations. I'm not prepared to put my name to this. So unless we're going to defer it and bring it back with proper information, I'm voting against it.
Anybody else want to come in? The recommendations have been moved and seconded. Oh, sorry, Stephen Reed's name has come up.
Sorry, I do apologise, it keeps getting kicked off. And Nigel Baker is a lot better looking than me, so I'll just pretend to be his voice and he can have an Australian accent for the next 30 seconds. What concerns me is what everyone else here has said. This may just be to approve or not approve borrowing, but as elected representatives, as part of a democracy, we have the responsibility to make sure that this is being managed well. And I don't think, at least the ones who have spoken, feel we're confident that that has actually happened. What is going to prevent us from being in a similar situation? I don't fly with the line that we should just be saying, yeah, borrow the money, otherwise it stalls. Someone's head should roll for this, because it's almost £1 million. This hasn't been managed appropriately, even if there is a process in place to manage a contract ongoing to get to a point earlier to go, this isn't being done right. Heavy vehicles going over a road, it's in worse condition than when it started. There are conditions in the planning that say what the condition should be, what vehicles should be used. Why hasn't that been upheld? Why are we not putting enforcement action on this? The council is liable, fine. Who's responsible? This is not just a simple question about borrowing money. This is a question about how do we stop this from being in this position again?
Pat Kerry?
I was only going to say, interact at this stage, it was all agreed in the scheme. The road happened to be a concrete road. The concrete road has been broken up during the building of this development. The houses are up. The houses are waiting to be people to move into. I can go back and I can agree entirely that in future, if you want to come back overall and have a look at the contracts, it was a contract between the housing Erecnold, and it was the county, the state of the roads. The county wanted extra money as well to bring them up to the standard of being adopted. we're in a position at this point that we're not looking at the blame. We're really looking and asking for this money to let the houses, to get the road adopted and to move forward and find out later if there are any ramifications on either on the contractor or the provider. It's just looking at the people that are waiting with the keys and to get in and tidy the area up and it be adopted. If we carry on, we put people in the houses. I don't think they can go in the houses until the road is up to standard. But if it's not adopted, we're left with all these houses built and unadopted roads, and it will come back to bite, and it will cost the people that live in the houses or the council or Recknold in the future X amount plus. Let's get the people in, get the road finished up to the county standard and learn lessons from it, not on our part but for Recknold and the developers. That's what this is asking the money for, the borrowing for at this time.
Thanks for that, Pat. Kevin Gillen.
I've listened to a lot of the comments that have been said this afternoon, and I think some of the people know as much about this as I do, which is very little, listening to some of those comments. We're clearly conflating two very different issues here. There is whether we put right the problem with that road, and anybody who knows that road knows that it's never been in the best of conditions. It's not a traditional road. It's very similar to the ones in Tupton, actually, the ones on Ford Street and that sort of area. It's an old concrete block road, and clearly the building work has caused far more damage to that road than anybody anticipated, and that needs to be put right. It's not right that we argue over whether we put it right or not, because those people who live there have put up with a great deal for the last 12 months. And since this council is the contractor, it has an obligation to put it right, and that's what I think this paper is proposing to do. Now, if people are saying that they think there's something gone wrong, well, they may or may not be right about that. I simply don't know, but that shouldn't hold up actually putting it right. Cabinet has that power. It just needs the borrowing requirements to do it. I would have absolutely no objections at all if the scrutiny committee or the audit committee actually wanted to look at this and see whether any mistakes were made, and to hold people to account for those mistakes if they were, and to learn any lessons. But that's completely separate to actually putting the road right, Chair, and I think we just need to honour the promise that was made to the people of North Wingfield, who live upon that Whiteleas Avenue area, to put the road right and actually go up and support this motion.
Thanks for that. Alex Dale.
Chair, I apologise, I appreciate I've already spoken, but just for clarity, are we able to please put an amendment to the motion to defer this paper subject to additional information being required? Because I would like to propose that. I don't accept Councillor Gillett's point that we should be able to just make this borrowing decision without having full sight of the other options that may be available, and that's what deferral is all about, having a full overview of what's happened here and knowing what other options are available. It's a big decision to decide to borrow a significant sum of money, close to £1 million, without having the full information. So I just don't accept that explanation. I would like to formally request that we amend the proposal to deferral, if that's possible.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks. Nigel Barker.
Yeah, I weren't going to get involved in this because, like I said at the beginning, I'm very close to it. In fact, literally very close to it, about 50 yards away where I live. And I travel on this road every day to go to community centre. Well, I don't actually. I park across the road and walk across every crossing. But it's not the right thing to defer it either. I can support what Kevin's just said, that if we want to look at it through the audit or wherever committee or a review of what the whys and wherefores, how we've arrived at this, and if there are some mistakes made or there has been mistakes, we can highlight that. But we can't afford, for the people in Wingfield, people are starting to live in them houses already, and it's a mess. And I know Charlotte's sort of declared interest and not going to get involved, but you came and looked at it 2 or 3 occasions, I think, Charlotte, didn't you? And we were trying to backwards and forwards with county council, the developer, Recknold, and in an ideal world we wouldn't be asking for this money, but it's where we are, and I don't think deferring it will make a blind bit of difference.
we'll still end up having to do the road because otherwise people will not be able to live in the mess. So anyway, that's me.
Yeah, I feel we're going round the houses a little bit here, and I would be minded to agree with what's been said by Councillor Gillett and echo some of those comments about putting residents first. It's really important that we see this project through to completion and that we make sure people are able to live in safe, decent housing. That's our first priority as a council. And I think we absolutely have to come down on that decision today. I don't think it is the responsibility of us as councillors to sit here and make comments like heads should roll. I think that that's really quite inappropriate, and I don't think that this is the forum for that. I absolutely support taking this to scrutiny committees, taking this and having a proper look at what's happened and making sure that we manage projects better in the future, of course. But this is actually turning into a little bit of a Punch and Judy show, trying to make a wider political point. And I think actually all of us should just take a moment to think about the residents that are going to live in these homes, not ourselves, and not about making some grand gesture.
Thanks for that. Is Pat Kerry want to come back in?
I'm moving the recommendations 1, 2 and 3 are on the paper in front of you. Is there a seconder?
Well, I think an amendment's been moved and it's been seconded.
Has it?
Yeah. It has. So we've got to go to the vote, I would say, on the amendment that it be deferred and, I mean, we could say get on with the work and then it go to a scrutiny, but I think the words were it would be to be deferred and referred it to a scrutiny committee.
To be deferred for more details, Chair.
For more details. So that's been moved and seconded.
Just, Chair, do you want to add in and referral to the scrutiny?
So I think it needs to be deferred and some form of either scrutiny review or
an appropriate
appropriate working group with cross-party makeup to be able to review it. Appreciating it needs to be done quickly and no one wants to drag this out longer for we're happy.
Okay.
But I think we do have to have, you know, when we're asked to borrow an extra £1 million,
it needs to come back because deferral will have a cost.
Prepared on our conscience to know that that's the right thing to do, and I don't think all of us do feel that way at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to now go to Jane Dethick.
Can I just make council aware that if you are taking a decision to defer, you're going to vote on a decision to defer, that's going to have significant contractual implications. We are on site, we are trying to complete the houses. Every week that we hold the contract up, there will be prelims. They're not insignificant, and it could end up costing the council a significant extra amount of money by doing so. So I just wanted to make that point aware before you vote.
That's not our fault. That's their fault. It's just on the amendment, because I think people are getting confused about what the amendment's trying to achieve. It's not to hold up the development, it's so councillors can get a full understanding of what decision we are taking. No one is saying don't build the road. What we're saying is, do we trust and have know that the processes are in place to ensure that you're not going to come with a begging bowl in another month or 2 months for another million because some other part of the road has been missed, right? So that's what we're all saying. No one is saying hold this thing up, and I think no, we're not. At the end of the day, if councils are willing to borrow £1 million without having all the information, fill your boots and vote that way and vote through this vote against the amendment and vote through the motion. That is your prerogative as a councillor. I cannot take a decision without knowing all the information. I would just vote against it or abstain or something if I didn't understand it. Most people, some people that are commenting here are just happy to make a decision in haste because there might be an extra cost implication. We should not be taking decisions in haste. We should be taking decisions with all the information in front of us. So I'm voting for the amendment, which is to defer so we can quickly have a meeting, gather as much information as possible, feed it back to the groups, and then it can be pushed forward.
Chair, can I raise a point of order here? because we're being presented with contradictory information. In this report, we're actually told that in the alternative options and reasons for rejections, deliver within the existing envelope, rejected as 278 works must be completed to allow the majority of the development to be completed. We're being told that in the report. We're being told by somebody that it's all sorted and it needs doing so that the people have got to fit roads to get in and out of. Those two sentences aren't marrying up there. We've got the 151 officer telling us we need to vote for this no matter what because effectively it's going to hold the contractor up. We have basically been presented with this as a fait accompli, and it is not acceptable that that is happening in any way, shape or form.
Last week, I was worried that my car would fall into one of these holes and, you know, I'd be in a mess. So I do think it needs doing pronto. Does Jane Bedethick want to come back in?
Just to clarify for Councillor Hancock, the report is clear, is my belief that it's clear. If you don't proceed with, we have to proceed with the 278 works, that's a statutory requirement, that's a legal requirement, so we will have to spend that £849,000 anyway. What we would have to do, if you wanted to bring it within existing budgets and you didn't want us to proceed with the funding today, we would have to reduce the number of homes that we build, so we would build less homes. That would be the outcome of today. So if you want us to build less homes, we're going to have to fix the road. The report's clear, we have to fix the road, or we build less homes. That is the point. The point that I was making about deferring is if you don't take a decision today, we will still carry on with the road. We will have to stop on building some of the homes, and then the contractor will be sitting waiting for us to decide whether we're going to continue or not, and that will cost us the preliminary expenses. That was the point I was trying to make, so I hope that helps clarify a little bit.
I'm really unhappy with it.
Doesn't. That's why I'm trying to speak. Well, we could meet next week. We could meet on Thursday.
Enough time on it. So I'm going to ask people to vote on whether they accept the amendment, which is defer this and refer it to a scrutiny committee to look at more detail. I'm going to ask you to vote on that. All those in favour of the amendment?
Well done.
I'm sorry. Sorry. I have to take my hand away. I'm going to move on to the recommendations 1, 2 and 3 that are in front of you, and I'm sure we'll discuss this in another place at another time. A scrutiny can always pick it up later and pick through the bones of it, I think. There's recommendations 1, 2 and 3 that the Council approves borrowing of 0.849 million to fund the essential S278 works to complete the full development scheme at Whiteleas Avenue, that the Council approves the inclusion of this addition to the scheme in the HRA capital programme, and that Council approves the revised capital financing requirement, operational boundary and authorised limit as set out in the financial implications of this report. I'm going to ask you all to vote on that. How do I vote then?
There.
This one?
Yes.
Don't touch it, Christy.
Just leave it there.
So have we all managed to register a vote? It looks like that's the recommendations have been carried. 26 votes, 6 against and 13 abstentions. Thanks for that. That was an interesting debate, and I'm sure we'll come back to it at another time. I'm going to move on to agenda item 8, Treasury Management Update. Who's going to speak to this? Pat Kerry?
I am Chair. If you give me a minute while I get my tin hat. Medium-term financial plan, Treasury Management Update, April to September. SIPFA's revised Treasury Management Code that was adopted last financial year made some changes to the reporting requirements from April 23. Council has for many years received half-yearly updates, and this will continue, but the information contained in those and required to be reported under the code has changed, and this is reflected in this report that you have received today. You will note that in the report there are no compliance matters or risks to raise at this time. Recommended that the report be noted, Chair.
I'll second that.
It's been moved that the council note the Treasury Management activities. Does anybody wish to speak on this? No? Helen Weatherall.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there was a huge amount of detail in this report, which represents a huge amount of hard work by chief officers and their teams. So it was good to see, but a hard read, a tough read. What I took from it was that we seem to be performing very well, but I might have missed some nuanced data and detail in there. So I wondered whether it would be possible on appropriate tables, performance tables, to colour code the section of the table that shows how we are performing as either green where we're doing well or red. There may be areas that I have missed where we're not doing so well. And that would allow me to ask the right questions. For example, on page 33 and 34, there's a couple of tables where I thought it would be helpful to just see that we seem to be doing really well. And I would probably rate those all greens. And I would then ask the question, which I'm raising now, which is, how are we doing so well? And can you come and manage my household finances, please? Thank you.
Thanks for those comments, and I'm sure the appropriate officers will consider whether it's possible to do that. It would be perhaps a good idea. So I'm going to move to the recommendations that the Council note the Treasury Management activities undertaken during the period April to September 2023 as outlined in Appendices 1 and 2. Are we all in favour of this? Do you wish to vote by hands? Yep. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? So that's carried. Thank you for that. That was a quick one. Thanks, Chair. Next item is agenda item 9, proportionality of the council and appointments to committees. I think Sarah Sternberg may speak on.
Thank you, Chair. Following a number of changes in party memberships and having a newly elected councillor, there has been a need to review committee membership in accordance with the statutory proportionality rules. In addition, the opportunity has been taken to address licensing and gambling committee membership to bring it in line with the legislation, which requires a minimum membership of 10. This also affects the other licensing committee, which has also been increased to 10 to match. The council continues to be split into 4 groups for the purposes of the political proportionality rules, but now all members are in one of the 4 groups. I must apologise that Standards Committee isn't on your list. That was an error. There are no changes in Standards Committee, and the numbers were taken into account in looking at the overall figures. I think the only gaps we now have from the parties are in relation to the Labour group vacancies on the 2 licensing committees. And once we have those, we will circulate tomorrow a full list to everybody of the memberships of the committees. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Nigel Barker.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah, I meant to give these names before meeting. Forgot. So Councillor Cathy Rouse and Councillor Tony Lacey on the... Oh, Cathy Clegg, sorry. I've written it down.
Yeah, the younger one.
You nearly got another job there, Cathy. Cathy Clegg, sorry. On the, you've got the other names, haven't you? Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for that. Nominations from Alex.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would like to nominate Councillor Stokes as a new member onto one of the scrutiny committees and make a change there, although we're just trying to finalise some issues in terms of working around work commitments. As I understand it, we've delegated to be able to do this in consultation with yourself, so can I do that after the meeting, if that's okay? Yeah. And then just another question as well, Chair, just in relation to the licensing changes, how long have we been not acting in accordance with the regulations on that one? Because
Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Just since this May, the annual meeting, it was an error at that time, which I apologise I didn't pick up.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
So have we got all the nominations we need from all the groups? And we can deal with the one that Alex has mentioned afterwards.
Sorry, Chair, we did spot another error, which I think is that Councillor Jones is not listed on businesses scrutiny. Is that correct? Yeah, he's not listed on business scrutiny, I think, and he should be.
We've got now
he has been.
Clough, Reed and Spooner.
Yeah, and he has, and it's currently Spooner. Is it Reed or Clough? Reed, and so Councillor Jones replaced Councillor Clough back in May, but it's just not been updated on this sheet, I think.
Oh, right. So Councillor Jones, Mr Jones is replacing...
Well, he already is, but it's just an error on the sheet, yeah.
Is that all? So thanks for that. So I presume with the names that we all agree the recommendations 1 and 2. Do we need to take a vote on that? All those in favour? Any against? Any abstaining? So that's passed. Thanks for that then. That's item 9. Item 10, Local Plan Steering Group.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Following the recent government planning consultation, and as the leader indicated in response to a question at the last council meeting, this report proposes changes to the membership of the Local Plan Working Group. The leader has met the 3 other party leaders or their representative to discuss the proposal and report. This is to base the working group on 9 members and to allocate the seats in accordance with the statutory proportionality rules. This gives the numbers shown in recommendation 2. Recommendation 3 is that the members are proposed. Could I ask each party leader to give their party's members in order that recommendation 3 can be fulfilled? After the recommendations are moved and seconded, and I think David Thompson, the Assistant Director of Planning, would like to talk about the planning timescales which are driving this report. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Thanks for that. David? Oh, David.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. So yeah, just to expand on what Sarah was referring to there in terms of the recent consultation. Obviously, in terms of a local plan, clearly the objective of officers is to make sure that we do have an up-to-date plan, and then where there's any potential risk to that we take those into account in terms of how we're progressing and allocating resources towards getting a plan that will be up to date. So prior to the summer consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, but also wider changes to the planning system, there was a deadline in place for submission of local plans to be assessed under the current method of examination up to summer 2025. So we had basically made an assessment, and this went to Cabinet in March 24, that the best use of our time, with that being the position, was to focus on evidence gathering, and that's an exercise that officers have been involved in for around 9 months now, and we're making good progress in that respect. And at that time, so this is prior to the summer consultation, the new system for assessing local plans and preparing local plans was to be introduced around about now. We're talking about October 2024 under the previous government. So at that time, we took advice, including from external experts, Planning Officer Society, and as I say, we made a decision via Cabinet to focus on evidence gathering. The consultation this summer has kind of changed that context in that alongside the proposed changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, the deadline for submitting a plan under the current examination process was extended to December 2026. Clearly that's just over 2 years away, and at the point that we are now we've had that 9 or so months of evidence gathering. So from an officer perspective, whilst that deadline is tight, we consider it to be achievable, and a time frame showing basically the activity between now and November 2026. A 2-year timetable for getting a plan in place was approved at the recent cabinet meeting. To explain the kind of background to that, the consultation is, as members are aware, referring to quite significant changes to the National Planning Policy Framework. So the Council, as of today, has a local plan that is less than 5 years old, and therefore under current regulations is effectively protected in terms of having to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The proposed changes in the consultation would effectively reverse that position, so that with a new much increased housing target, we would, without any mitigation, without any real notice, would go into a period where we wouldn't have that 5-year housing land supply. So in terms of balancing the risks, it is likely that there will be quite significant changes to the context and whether our local plan is actually up to date. So from an officer perspective, the 2-year timetable is considered to be doable but tight, but certainly one that we need to resource and at least try and achieve, and obviously closely monitor progress in relation to that, because the alternative is waiting for the new 30-month system to come in. The current government have said that they would effectively adopt what came through the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act, which was clearly passed under the previous government, but that wouldn't actually be introduced until summer or autumn next year. So the likelihood is that the shorter time frame to getting to an up-to-date local plan again would be through pursuing the existing system, and therefore that was the timetable that was approved by Cabinet. So that's just a bit of background, Chair.
Thank you for that. Nigel Barker?
Yeah, thanks, David. And I bet you're getting fed up and saying all that, aren't you? You've said it several times. I'll just move the recommendations. Have you got the names, Sarah? I've forwarded them on. Do you want me to read them out again, or do you want me to...
Sarah did ask for the names to be given after the recommendations, whether they were passed or not.
I thought you wanted them before, didn't you?
If I might, Chair, yes, I have 5 names from Labour and I have the Independents, but I haven't got anything from the Conservatives or the Lib Dems at this point. Yeah, Councillor Hancock, thank you.
So I believe...
Yeah. When you do, I'll move that recommendation.
Is it seconded?
Yeah. Do you want to let Alex come in?
Alex Dale.
Thank you, Chair. And firstly, thank you to Councillor Barker for honouring his word at the last meeting, and this is definitely a step in the right direction. You know, having said what we said about the previous system, this is definitely positive, so thank you for that. I'd like to propose Councillor Cooper and Councillor Foster as the Conservative Group members. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Are there any other nominations? Do you want to give them now from the...
I'll move Councillor Hancock from Library.
Yes.
Yeah. And what about the Independents?
We've already got
Oh, thanks for that.
Yeah.
So we've got the names.
We've got the names, thank you, Chair.
Before. So can we approve the recommendations? Shall we take a vote on it? By show of hands. Thanks for that. Anybody against? Anybody abstaining? Oh, so thanks for that. That's carried, and we've got the names. Okay, that's item 10. Item 11, proposed North East Derbyshire consultation on virtual attendance of members at meetings. I think...
Yes, it's me again, Chair.
Oh.
Thanks. As I'm sure members are aware, the Government is consulting on changing the rules to allow members to attend formal meetings virtually in certain circumstances. The consultation includes the possible introduction of proxy voting. Standards Committee has been through the consultation at their last meeting, and responses, hopefully based on their comments and suggestions, are shown highlighted yellow on your additional paper. The deadline for responding to the consultation is 19th of December, and clearly we don't have another council meeting before then. But the government is also encouraging individual members to respond to this consultation, as well as local government organisations. I don't know if the Chair of Standards wishes to add anything to that, Chair, but the recommendation is to approve.
Does the Chair of Standards wish to speak? Kevin Gillett.
I'll say a few words then. Thank you, Chair. Obviously, the committee actually discussed this in great detail, and it was one of those where there was a genuine discussion where minds were changed during the course of the debate as well. We welcome the principle of allowing for some remote attendance at meetings, but we felt that the general rule should be that councillors are expected to be present at meetings. That is, I think, what most of us put ourselves forward. I say when we put ourselves forward to be elected, and it's what our constituents expect of us. But you know, we accept that there may be circumstances where that is not possible, and in those genuine circumstances, it's only right and proper that an alternative is put forward. So, for example, if somebody's taken ill and can't come to a meeting, that might be a circumstances. But just booking your holiday around to clash with a council meeting and putting that first probably shouldn't be. We also felt that if members do attend remotely, some protection should be put in place so that the normal rules of debate apply, that you leave your camera on so that you can be seen to be there and listening to the debate as well, but also that it goes in the record that you attended remotely rather than in person. And there should be a limit as to the number of times you attend remotely, but that could be extended by council if the circumstances are right, just in the same way that we can extend somebody's period of absence if the circumstances are appropriate. As far as proxy voting was concerned, with a majority of one, I can see lots of merits in having proxy voting for members who don't turn up. But in terms of the democratic process of this council and local government generally, we didn't think it was right. Members should be here either in person or remotely to cast the vote in person and be held accountable for that. They shouldn't just be able to hand a vote over to somebody else to vote on their behalf. And I think, Chair, that is what the report sums up. Obviously, some people in this room may have a different view, and therefore I'd encourage everybody who does have a different view to whatever's agreed today to go on the website and put their own views forward as well.
Thanks for that. Martin Thacker.
Thank you, Chair. I echo quite a bit of what Councillor Gillett's just said. I think from my point of view, there was a lot of learning to be had from the time of COVID, where we did have meetings online. Not just this authority, I'm talking about a whole range of authorities. We can all remember Jackie Weaver, for example. And of course, there were conduct matters, people shouting out online and other incidents, shall we call them, that happened, and this authority was amongst those. The thing for me is as well is that it's the technological challenges for people trying to access meetings online, because we all know sometimes how difficult it is when our broadband's down, or we're having issues accessing and we can't get on, and meetings are delayed because somebody's trying to get in but they can't, or they're online and then suddenly their pictures are frozen. So technological issues are one of the things that I think is a drawback to even considering online meetings. The other thing for me is about development of a protocol. I note that the comments are about keeping a camera on, for example, because we are also aware of people who've kept cameras off and then gone and done other things, and then they haven't actually been party to the debate, or they've heard part of a debate, they've come in at the tail end, or they've missed everything that's just been said and they've repeated it, or they're up to other things, shall we say, while the camera's off, and we've seen some things that have made national headlines in that regard. So I welcome the idea that we should keep the camera on, but again, with some of the meetings, perhaps, maybe it's not wise to keep the camera on, but we'll leave that comment there. The thing that I think is missed in some of these responses is about inclusion. We've mentioned here about increasing the diversity of people willing and able to stand for election, but I think we need to have comment about inclusion of those with certain needs, disabilities or whatever. I think hybrid meetings, for example, presents a number of issues for people with disabilities. I've seen meetings where they are hybrid, where people with hearing loss, for example, are not able to get a quality access to that meeting. Sometimes it's because pictures shift around and they're not multi-pinned, and there's all sorts of other things around that. I know the deaf community particularly struggle with online meetings and they prefer in person. I know it works the other way because there'll be some people who are disabled who prefer to be at home, and this would facilitate them. But there's no mention about inclusion here, and I think that's one thing that's missing from these comments. Other than that, I do support what's said. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Alex, Dale.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And echo much of what Councillor Thacker's said, and I think even with our fangled computer technology system, if anyone watching at home was watching this, I think they might think that there's a room full of ventriloquists, the way that the camera keeps moving around. But anyway, I think our group fully agrees with what's in the paper. I think we broadly came to the same sort of conclusions as standard when we discussed it sort of as a group. So yeah, agree with the general principle of it being an exception, but it can be helpful in terms of that flexibility that it provides. I think the key thing is we just need to be mindful of who's the arbitrator in deciding what constitutes an exceptional circumstance. Is that the monitoring officer? Is it the chair, for example? Not necessarily these are things for now, but just to think about moving forward. And how it affects the 6-month rule, it's sort of alluded to in the feedback, but there's no direct mention of how a remote attendance or a proxy vote, if it were to happen, would impact on the 6-month rule. And I think we just need to be mindful of that as well. And I think a bit of differentiation between meetings. I think potentially with less formal, but shall we say, meetings like perhaps scrutiny meetings may lend themselves more to remote meeting than, say, full council, which I would completely agree. I think full council should be done in person almost 100%, unless there's absolutely a very special circumstance. And just on that camera on point, I think, yeah, would agree that camera on, apart from the caveats that Martin provided, but the other thing we just need to be mindful of, being a rural district, internet not being fantastic, is sometimes people have to turn the camera off because they haven't got any signal. So that's sort of just to throw into the mix there as another observation, I suppose. But yeah, broadly support what's in the paper. I think it makes sense as a response.
Thanks for that then. David.
Thanks, Chair. Largely, I was going to pick up because Alex literally just at the very end picked up on that. We do have dodgy broadband, and sometimes you have to turn the video off to be able to stay connected. But picking up on Martin's point about inclusivity, at Tupton Parish we have a councillor who's a wheelchair user. You get the first bit of snow or ice and she can't get out, so it does open the doors to actually increase representation in council membership. So it would actually be a very good step forward. Overall, though, as I say, barring that little bit, I think we perhaps need to tweak the response about the cameras and have it where practical. I think I would have fully agree with what's in here.
Thank you. Ross?
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad to see this, actually. I think it's a real positive move that the government's consulting on this and moving in that direction, because ultimately that's where society is moving. I in my day job, I work at home 99% of the time. It's very rare I actually go into the office, and I'm scoping and delivering massive IT projects in the NHS. So it's not that it can hold back progress and delivering on key targets and stuff. It can actually be a positive, because I've got childcare issues that I have sometimes, so it helps with that. And I think from a council point of view, it would actually bring more diversity into the council in terms of people's backgrounds and what they've got going on in their life. Like David said, they might be wheelchair users, they might have caring responsibilities for elderly family, they might have small children. There's a wide range of reasons why making the meetings hybrid, at least. I'm not saying go full remote, because like Councillor Thacker's touched on, there are downsides to going full remote, but having that option of both, I think, is a positive move, and I think we should be pushing that point forward, that having both of those options must be good for councillors, our residents, and everybody else that might want to get involved in the political structure and governance.
Thanks for that. I'll come back to Kevin.
Again, they're helpful comments, actually. In terms of the technology is a technology, and for sometimes, we've all experienced it, sometimes it works, and then the next meeting you have, it doesn't work at all. And if you're coming in remotely, that is the risk you take. And if there are a set of rules, whatever those set of rules are, and you don't comply with them, then you won't be part of the meeting, would be my assumption. I think it would be helpful if the government goes down this line, if it publishes some guidelines that we can all work to, rather than expecting each authority to come up and reinvent the wheel all the time, and that, because that will lead to some very bad outcomes, I suspect. As far as inclusion, you're right about that. We did actually have a good discussion about inclusion. It's probably not captured as much in the report. It will bring in more people, but the problem is we're all different. And whatever set of rules we get, we won't accommodate everybody, because there will always be somebody who's got something about them that makes them slightly different to the circumstances that we've got. But if we can make it to bring more people in, fine. But what I think we should be doing is making sure that, in our case, this venue is suitable for them to come, rather than if you've got a disability or something, that means that this venue is not suitable. You've got to stay at home while the rest of us come in. Similarly, with regards to employment, people who work, the laws should be strengthened to allow people who worked so that they've got a stronger right to come to these meetings, and that an employer can't say no in the way that I know some employers have said in the past. But ultimately, being a council isn't a job. It's very different from a job. You're putting yourself forward to the community to be elected, and they have a right to expect certain basic standards from you, one of which is a commitment that when all other things being equal, you're actually present in the meeting itself, but you're allowed to take fully part in that meeting as well, whatever your own personal circumstances. So what I would suggest is that perhaps if we agree the report as it is, but we just tweak it a little bit to take just to re-emphasise the point about inclusion, because we did have a good discussion about it, but I think you've highlighted that we perhaps didn't quite capture it as well as we should have done.
Thanks for that. So I think Sarah Sternberg's the officer, responsible, and between herself and Kevin, we've obviously heard the comments, and they're really useful about inclusion, etc. And that maybe if you're all agreed, she could tweak it a little bit and then send the responses off. Are we all agreed on that? Can I show of hands? Anybody against? Thank you for that then. Thanks for that. Next item is agenda item 12. To answer any questions from the public asked under procedure rule number 9.2. So the first question is from Councillor Cupid.
Thank you, Chair. Given the mounting pressure in the form of national grid plans for large pylons, the likely follow-on increases in planning applications for solar farms and battery installations sponsored by the government, and its wide-ranging changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, our countryside is increasingly at risk. Will the Leader of the Council therefore confirm formally that this Council will support the work of Derbyshire County Council, along with various other local groups and organisations who are working hard to get the Amber Valley area formally listed as a national landscape, which was previously known as an area of outstanding natural beauty?
Nigel Barker?
Yeah, thanks Charlotte for that. I've got to be honest, I don't really know where you're going with that, but as far as I understand, and I've had lots of conversations with David, who sat here, that our officers at this district council have been working very closely with the county council officers and discussing how to highlight key areas of concern and regarding the national grid proposals. And I think this included collaboration in responding to the recent informal consultation. I've got that somewhere, but I'll not wave it about. That we submitted. We raised concerns about the impact of the proposals on the character of landscape, heritage matters, and also questioned the process of selecting the preferred route. So officers will continue to work together through, I think, what's called the development consent order, David. I think that's what you've asked me to say. Again, I'm led to believe that there's a statutory process relating to the designation of national landscapes, and there are very technical arguments that need to be made. So with that in mind, I'm happy to task our officers here to continue to work with counterparts at county, and if needed, report back on this work to the Environment Scrutiny Committee. So I hope that helps.
Thanks for that, Nigel. Did you want to come back in, Charlotte? Or can I move on to the next question?
Just a quick supplementary. Thank you, Councillor Barker. It genuinely wasn't a loaded or political question. It was solely that, obviously, with all the planning changes that we've already touched on today, that there is a lot of changes coming. There is a lot of, rightly, weight and attachment given to the Amber Valley area in terms of the landscape. So it was just really for council, alongside the officer work, council here today, to just, sort of give the commitment that you're happy to support and explore it, if you're happy to just confirm that.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, like I say, it's. I'm sure officers will take all that into consideration, and if there's any way of hitting that target to get that designation, then we'll do it.
Thank you, Nigel. Question B, maiden speech from Jess Stokes.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for the warm welcome. So my question was about Claycross Active in the opening date, but this has very helpfully already been answered at the start of the meeting, so if it's okay, I would like to withdraw my question.
Okay, thanks. We did have quite a good intro about this matter, so I will, thanks for that, Jess. I'll move on to question C from Helen Weatherall.
Thank you, Chair, and the question's there for everybody. I bet you've read it already, but for the avoidance of any doubt, this is not about one result. It's about all results, all of us, and as pointed out to me, quite rightly, I was elected with 75% of voters in Ashover not voting for me either, and it's pitiful, actually. I used our latest result as an example. I applaud anyone who puts themselves forward for public life, for public office. It's not for the faint-hearted, but we must all be concerned about the fact that people say on the doorstep, I'm not interested in politics and I don't vote. And particularly young people don't vote. They don't see our relevance or our efforts to make a difference. But I bet they vote every now and then, and I'm a celebrity. So, Councillor Barker, this question is really putting a marker down to say maybe we need to do something different to make the change in public attitude that might be needed, and I'd welcome your comments.
Nigel.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I really wish I got a clever answer for you. I will be working at it for a bit, but unfortunately I haven't. And a bit like you said, I remember when I first got elected in 1987. I know, I can't believe it myself really when I look back. But I won with twice as many votes as anybody else in North Wingfield than the opposition got, not anybody, because there were 300. But however, when I went to university, and I did, I got a degree in social sciences. One of the first thing we did on that first year, we looked at this democratic deficit, and I looked at the figures I'd got elected on, and I got 17% of the votes in Wingfield. So 83% of people that could have voted for me in Wingfield didn't. So that knocked me duck off, because I thought I were right clever. So, but it's a fair question, and it's something. It's why one of the things we looked at, one of my first essays in that course were looking into that. That's going back to 1987, 89, should I say, and it's not got any better. Basically, I think there's various reasons. People don't understand the consequence of local government. It's not too bad when it's a general election, but if it's just a local election, we struggle to get people in. Whether it's to do, austerity's got out to do with that, and people, all we've been doing is cutting for the last don't know how long, so they don't see the relevance of what we're doing. We have tried at the council to engage with that, with the enhanced communication channels, social media, you said we did stuff, you know, and citizen panels. I remember, and I would just refer to Graham about this, where we had a democracy week going back in the day. Can you're obviously nodding, Martin, where we went into schools, we went into Henry Fanshawe and Tupton Hall. We invited young kids to come into council, youth groups and things like that, and we tried to get people motivated in that way. And so the answer to the question is, Ellen, I haven't got the foggiest idea what to do. Well, but if you have got any ideas, we'd be more than happy to accept them, Sarah, won't we? It's something, I think you said, Sarah, when we were talking about this, there is a expectation that as a council, as governance, we try as best to encourage people to vote.
Yes,
but
as a returning officer, yeah.
yeah, and it's not easy, and so it's what it is. So yeah, if you have any ideas, please come forward.
The $64,000 question, which we haven't got the answer for. Right, question D, Alex.
She might have
Sorry, do you want to come back in?
She might have a big idea.
Yeah, she might have. Ellen.
Unfortunately not, but having done prevent training yesterday, one of the factors that leads to radicalisation is non-engagement in the democratic process. And I do worry that as we head down through 20% to 10% to maybe 5% people actually engaging, then there's a bit of a Pandora's box there. I think it's about the way that we manage the voting process and the democratic processes.
I think it's a comment.
It's a comment. Yeah. So would Councillor Barker agree with me that we maybe need to look at the processes that we follow and whether they need modernising? Using pencils in booths on pieces of paper might not be the way forward.
I'm sure he would agree. I'm going to move on to.
I have pressed the button.
No.
But I do agree with that, and I think your sentiment in your comment about apathy rules, and that's when you get extreme parties coming through on the outside that nobody wants. And there's that thing in Alfeda's impact when they end up with a yellow shed, but nobody voted for yellow shed. You know what I mean? It was second option for everybody, and so there's issues around how we do the voting and all that. But we'll look at anything, I'm sure.
Thanks for that. Alex Dale, question D.
Didn't want to interrupt that very interesting debate there. But given the concern over increased fly tipping in certain hotspots around the district, particularly around rural communities, can the Cabinet member provide the following info in terms of the number of fly tipping incidents and clean-ups recorded in the past 3 financial years and 2024 to date? Thanks, Chair.
Steve Pickering.
Just waiting for it to go. Oh, there we are. Look, thanks, Alex, for that question. It is very serious, and particularly if it's on your doorstep or on our doorsteps, it's a really significant issue. Our fly tipping data is reported to or submitted to DEFRA on a quarterly basis. So I've got some information, if you've got your pen at the ready. In 2021-22, the financial year, the total number of incidents that were reported were 862, and of those 658 were dealt with by street scene. Following financial year 22-23, 649 incidents and 437 dealt with by street scene. 23-24, 660 incidents, 540 dealt with by street scene. And the latest bit, for the first 2 quarters of 2024, there were 336 incidents and 279 dealt with by street scene. So there is a trend, a general trend of improvement as time's gone on. But we also report incident data as well, along with all other local authorities, 309 local authorities. And then by DEFRA we're ranked against those, with number 1 being the best authority. In 21-22 we were ranked 90th out of 309, and the following year 22-23 we were ranked 64th. So we had an improvement in that over that period of time. And the other bit of information that's notified is enforcement actions, where fixed penalty notices have been issued. And in 21-22 we ranked 64th out of the 309, and the following year 22-23 we were ranked 36th. So I think there is a general trend of improvement along that. But I do know what we do notice, and on our doorstep, yours, Alex, and mine in that area, so around Marsh Lane the Handleys, Apenall, Colaston bit for other members geographically. There have been recently some real vile fly tipping episodes on there. So in that bit, and our officers have worked in partnership and they've been pressed by me for cameras, members of the public, all sorts of things. The great difficulty that we have is finding that evidence. You know, fly tippers become, I think that's worse than fly tipping. You know, the stuff that's been dumped around there. So externally to that, I think in that particular area it's increased, it's fair to say. But there are currently 2 prosecutions being undertaken in relation to evidence in that area, and officers are continuing to monitor that. Obviously they're live incidents, but where we do get the evidence for things like that serious stuff, we will take prosecutions. They'll be going to court. It won't be a fixed penalty notice for that level of fly tipping. It's utterly disgraceful. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And it is a serious issue.
Let's hope the prosecutions get in the press and it deters people. Alice.
Absolutely agreed, Chair. Thank you very much. And thank you for the information, Councillor Pickering. That's really useful. I'm glad you referenced our sort of area, and in particular the Handleys are the ones where I'm getting most complaints. Although I know it's a problem in some other rural areas like Shirland, and it's been mentioned to me. It feels like from what you're saying that the stats are not going in the wrong direction, but certainly on a local hotspot basis, we are seeming to see much more prevalent. So the Handleys in particular, loads more incidents happening in those locations. So I do wonder whether, you mentioned cameras, whether they could be reconsidered and whether additional cameras could be looked at being purchased. I know parish councils are even going to that lengths of discussing that as well, and whether we might look at other measures, like, for example, increasing the fines. I know that was discussed before, but would there be any reconsideration of that, please? Thank you, Chair.
Do you want to come back in, Steve? I mean, I think our officers do a marvellous job finding out who these, when they can, finding out who these people are. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean, the crucial thing is gathering the evidence. In some cases, we have used cameras. I think we had one disguised as a brick or something like that. They cleared up the... Now, we don't know, but the camera disappeared. So we don't know whether that were litter pickers or the cleaning up of the rubbish. And the £1,500 a piece, you know, but we do need to look at that. We are talking to some parishes at the moment that's interested in looking at wildlife cameras, the ones that don't have a little light on the front that indicates where they are, because you can spot them easily in the dark. So there are a range of things being looked at, but that's the key thing. It's the gathering evidence. And I appreciate there are in other areas of the district as well. I was just using ours as an example. And as I drove on Snowdon Lane yesterday, there's been some more stuff dumped just before you get towards Garden Centre. And it seems to be easier for people just to drive to places like that and tip up the back of a truck. I think the fines that we've got generally for general fly tipping tend to be working, and the stats are showing that. I think the maximum of £1,000 for like that person that's doing the stuff I've been referring to, we wouldn't want to give a fixed penalty notice for that. We'd want to have that person in court. You know, some of the challenges are if we find everybody £1,000 and they can't afford it, we've then got to take them to court to recoup the money if they've not paid on the fixed penalty notice. It costs us money to do that. If they're found guilty and the court imposes a fine, we don't get that money. It goes to the Crown. It don't come to the District Council. So it can be more expensive in the long run. But I think the level of fines we've got, which I think are about £400 maximum at the moment, do seem to be effective with people that's generally fly tipping. I think the ones that are doing the serious stuff won't be affected by that. I also think even if the county council household waste management were open to them free of charge, I don't think they'd be going there either, where they're coming from. I still think they'd dump it in Handley or Marsh Lane or Sherland or wherever it is, they're a different ball game altogether. So I think for general fly tipping, I think we've got it about right, and enforcement and monitoring that all the time. I think it's a much more serious issue about what I think are probably unlicensed fly-by-night odd jobbers that's coming round with the back of a flatbed truck and tipping it up into local lanes. But we're monitoring both. But if you've any better ideas and you want to have a chat to me outside the meet, please come and do it.
We've got a barrow.
Thanks for that.
A big
then.
barrow.
I'm going to move on. Item 13 says to consider any motions from members under rule number 10. Motion number 1, or motion A, proposed by Steve Clough.
Thank you, Chair. Like planning itself, this motion took some time to get on the agenda. Initially, I had to withdraw because there were some legal issues, because ongoing work was taking place. So then having to relook at the motion had much more body to it. Then had to relook at the motion, working with legal, who then worked with David from planning to get the motion that's on the table today. I think you will agree with me that that as councillors for the district, we have faced many questions from residents about developments over the years that have varying degrees of impact on our communities, with some developments causing us great concern while work is being undertaken. This is why I don't wish this motion to be based on any political outlook, but pure and simply to better consider and protect our residents in future. Our planning team have a very difficult job negotiating through complex matters, not just at application stage, but also throughout the development, while at the same time trying to keep a balanced, positive relationship with developers working on site. That being said, the authority applies conditions to planning consents to ensure control of varying elements prior to site work starting, during the process and upon completion. What has become apparent to me over the years is that larger developers sometimes stray from the agreed conditions or try to vary or rescind them. And at times, our enforcement team has to make a judgment call based on any breach and the ongoing viability of the development. This leads to what residents sometimes feel is developer power, when in fact there is a balancing act taking place within the current planning framework rules. For me, this has recently been brought closer to home with the development of over 300 homes on land at Westhope in Killamarsh, where a number of key conditions have been identified as being breached, but the council has had to make a difficult judgment call on whether to apply penalties or allow work to continue, as the latter could have potentially been costly for the district council. One of the main conditions that was of great concern, it was a condition, no development of any phase of development, site clearance or proprietary work on any phase of the development until construction environmental management plan was in place. The builders just moved onto site, totally ripped all the hedgerows, the trees, started installing, turning all the ground over, started installing the entry points, all before this condition had been met. And in doing that, what they did, they used a specific condition which allows remedial works to take place as part of the reason for stripping the site and starting the works. So that made it very difficult for the planning team to deal with. This is really worrying, as large builders can just move onto a piece of land and apply their own rules time after time, leaving the local planning authority in a high-risk strategic situation. This makes a total mockery of the planning process and really undermines the conditions that are applied by planning officers, the planning committee, and on this particular application, the planning inspector at appeal. I hope you will join me and back this motion, supporting our residents' rights to be protected against some unscrupulous developers by ensuring our planning enforcement officers are given the protected powers to ensure conditions are adhered to across sites of all magnitudes, ensuring consistency and fairness across all sites and developers. I'd like to propose the motion.
Thanks for that. Is it seconded? Second. Thanks. Nigel Barker.
Yeah, thanks for that, Stephen. And obviously you've a considered motion there, and I fully get it's not political or whatever, but and we fully recognise the sentiments behind it. I think there's people in our group who've got similar concerns, but during the discussion we realised that I think you were chair of an organisation scrutiny committee just before the election that looked at all this, and that's not being clever because it came to cabinet just after the election, I think with 2 or 3 other cabinet reports that to be honest we approved them. We recommended at the cabinet that the recommendations from that previous administration organisation scrutiny report be noted and taken into account as part of the development process of the new council plan. And them recommendations, and it does link into your thing, provides training to councillors and parish councils on planning enforcement and distributes the planning enforcement service progress reports to planning committee receives to all members following that training. It monitors year-on-year increases in cases to assess whether an additional post in the planning enforcement team is required, explores way of reducing cases being received via email and in said channels complaints through the online report it function with a view to closing down public complaints to the email channel if possible, review the local enforcement plan to remove impracticalities and make it consistent. I can advise you that a number of these issues have been picked up in the council plan. For example, the promotion of successful enforcement activity, a commitment to enforcing planning conditions and prioritising the use of the Section 215 notices to address untidy land. These objectives have been translated into actions within the planning service plan, which includes a commitment to update the planning enforcement plan, including review of priority, given to Section 215 in addition to a programme for member training. So there are specific appraisal objectives for members of the planning team to ensure that these objectives are progressed. A detailed update has been provided to members of the planning committee on the enforcement function, expanding this training to others, and a review of the enforcement plan are the priorities for the service in the early part of 2025. So with all that in mind, rather than going through the process again, which you're suggesting there, I'd suggest the committee's time would be better spent reviewing where we are with those recommendations that were made back in 2023 and therefore can I amend the motion to read that the council resolves to request that a relevant scrutiny committee review the recommendations of the organisation scrutiny committee made in June 2023 and that they are being implemented to take place from April 2025. So all those recommendations, they've had 2 years to be embedded in the enforcement team. There are specific issues, and I'm sure within that scrutiny review, I'm fully expect all those issues you've raised, Stephen, all those issues to be raised and addressed by the planning officers as we go through that. So rather than go back to the beginning, which you're suggesting there's already a good amount of work that I think you were involved in. I know Joe were on that committee, weren't you, Joe? That did a lot of work into exactly what you're talking about now. And like I say, that's not poo-pooing what you've put in there, because we fully accept that it's an issue, and it has been an issue for a long while. So that's what I'm recommending, that Joe, you need that I'll move the amendment that I've stated.
Is it seconded?
I'll second that amendment, please, Chair.
Thanks for that. Charlotte,
You want to say anything?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I presume, Councillor Barker, that amendment still keeps sections 2 and 3.
Not 3.
So it's removing 3 as well. And so not to write to the government.
Not at this stage.
Okay, because that would, to be honest with you, I mean, I don't know what Councillor Clough's view is. I'd be more inclined to support the amendment if it amended 1 but kept 2 and 3, and I'm not sure how you can delete 3 because that's a pretty key part of the motion is to write to the government. Because to be honest with you, that I agree that you know, locally I think our enforcement team do a fantastic job. They're small, I'd like them to be bigger, but I think they do a fantastic job. But I think that, as Councillor Clough's mentioned and hinted at, I think that nationally, and this is something that I discussed with the previous government, we need more enforcement powers. We need to have, I think Councillor Clough phrased it as more teeth, but we need more enforcement powers to be able to take a stronger stance against developers. You know, Councillor Clough's mentioned ones in his patch. I can also mention lots of developments in my patch where we've had issues and either had to work through them quite slowly and painfully, or it's been the case that we can't do anything, or occasionally we can. So to me, I'd be more inclined to sort of support the amendment if number 3 is kept, and would also, if you won't sort of budge on that, I'd ask the monitoring officer for a bit of advice, because I would view that as quite a distinct separate bit of the motion, and the amendment would otherwise negate it. So would appreciate clarity on that from both.
Definitely.
Do you wish to come in? I think Councillor Barker's stated that he doesn't agree with the item 3.
Just for clarity, sorry, Chair, if the scrutiny committee recommends that we write to government, then we can consider that.
I'm going to just move then on to Ross Shipman unless you want to come in,
Have we
Sarah.
got a comment on whether it negates it or not before I go, please?
So, as I understand what the leader's just said, all 3 recommendations will therefore be going to the scrutiny committee if the amendment's approved, but it will be for the scrutiny committee to write to government following their review.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
If and when necessary.
Yeah, that's fair.
Ross Shipman.
I think the main bit of this motion is that the council needs more powers. Surely that is the crux of what this motion's getting at. The other 2 bits, like Nigel says, they're either being done, they've already been approved, whatever, recommended, being reviewed. But the last one, which is wanting more powers for this council, is the key bit of this motion. I don't understand how you can possibly remove that out of this motion. Nigel's saying it's been removed. What is being said is all 3 of these are being taken to the scrutiny committee. But you're still removing it out of the motion. You're basically just saying, well, we'll look at it another day. The motion's nothing at that point, is it? Because it's going to get kicked into long grass at a scrutiny committee and never to be seen again. Like most other things that end up in a scrutiny committee that come from here.
Well, I think that's something to debate. As I said, it has been said that a previous scrutiny committee, the organisation scrutiny committee of June 2023, did look at this and did make some recommendations which could be very valid. I'll move along. Susie Cornwall.
That's that then.
Am I speaking?
Yeah.
I've got great sympathy with this motion, but I actually want to support the amendment because I believe I can better serve the residents of Homewood by having my concerns raised at a scrutiny committee and therefore at a cabinet level as soon as possible, where we can then also insist on writing to government for more powers. A giant refrigerator was built metres from residents' homes in Homewood. This was agreed by the previous administration. And planning have told me that there are lessons to be learned from the challenges that the conditions were placed on it. Now, I appreciate that this provides absolutely no relief to the residents of Homewood who are affected 24/7 because of this build. But I can assure residents that planning and I are working really hard behind the scenes to solve this current problem that was created by the previous administration. So I want to speak in favour of the amendment to this motion. I'd very much welcome being invited to this scrutiny committee so that I can reflect the residents of Homewood's experience and my experience of the challenges which these conditions have put on this bit and the lessons that have been learned. So by going to a scrutiny, I feel I'm able to better support the residents. I can find a better way forward, so that this doesn't happen to any other residents in North East Derbyshire. But this issue of developer power is also being taken to the Business Scrutiny Committee. So I'd like to invite Stephen Clough back to the Scrutiny Committee, the Business Scrutiny Committee, because we're raising that issue there as well.
Thanks for that one. Kevin Gillett?
The opposition are actually pushing at an open door. It's just a question of procedure is all we're talking about. I think everybody in this room believes not just this authority, but local authorities need more powers to help shape the places that we're responsible for. But simply writing to the government and saying, just give us more powers, isn't a proper letter. We need to explain what powers we want, why we want them, and we want the resourcing to go with it as well. It's pointless having a power if you don't have the resources to deal with it. And therefore, the amendment sends it back to Scrutiny Committee. Everybody who's on that committee can help shape that letter. It then goes to Cabinet, and it goes in the name of the Cabinet to government, and we can then ask Cabinet to use its position in some of the organisations that it's in, like the Association of District Councils, to bring other councils on board. But you are actually pushing at an open door. It is just the procedure. Let's send it to the Scrutiny Committee and then get a proper debate and report presented where councillors like Councillor Cornwall can go along and actually relate their experience of this, because her story is quite devastating, really, when you hear about it and how unfair it is and how little this council can now do about it to put it right. So I'd urge you to adopt this, and I think you will get out of it what you ultimately want. It's just a question of the best way of doing it.
Thanks for that. Joe Birkin.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Barker said, yeah, I was involved in that scrutiny committee a couple of years ago that was chaired by Councillor Clough. I think it was a very good project that we got involved in there. I think a lot of good work was done there, and we had a lot of information from officers across the board. It was looking at planning and environmental enforcement requirements, what the situation was, if and what was missing, and what we could do about it to improve the situation. We looked at a multiverse. I've lost me where I'm going there. The multiverse, or the Spider-Verse, whatever it might be. Multi-agencies, that's the smart phrase. Multi-agencies who were involved in all of these aspects that we were looking at, and when they were involved. And as I say, I think it did a lot of work, and we made some good recommendations. So it would be prudent to follow up on those recommendations and say where they're going. One of the things that was not highlighted at that meeting, at that scrutiny committee, which worked for about 5 or 6 months as they normally do, was a specific and emergency need for additional powers, for extra powers. Extra powers wasn't mentioned anywhere within the report, I don't think by any of the individuals that we spoke to. There was certainly a requirement, as there always is, having been an officer in local government myself. There was always a requirement for extra staff would be useful and would be able to sort of help to deal with things better. But one of the other things was communication, so that people, individuals, residents out in the community, and parish councils who have I get a lot of grief from my parish council about what's not happened. The enforcement officers never work. That's one of the brickbats that's always thrown at me. So one of the things was to make sure that we do share information, so that we're not only taking information, but we're sharing information with residents and with parish councils, so that the officers have got sufficient information to be able to use the powers that we have got and to use them properly to make sure that enforcement does work. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. David Hancock.
Thanks, Chair. The concern I've got about this amendment, because I think it's probably well intentioned, but it's effectively just navel gazing. We're talking about reviewing a decision that was taken by a scrutiny committee prior to the last set of district elections, so we've had a change of district administration, we've had a change of national government, and we're now on about going back to a scrutiny committee again to review what the previous scrutiny committee hasn't actually fully brought in. So are we going to be looking at post-2030 before we actually do anything here? And I think that's the bit that concerns me. I think it probably touches on Helen's point as to why people can't be bothered to vote, because they feel like nothing's achieved. I fully agree with what Charlotte said. The crux of this is to write to government and ask for more powers, because we need it. I mean, the planning team do a brilliant job, but their hands are tied. There's so little they can actually do. So I think let's put the bits that need to go to scrutiny. Let's get the ball rolling on the stuff that was agreed to 2 years ago and hasn't moved any further forward, and let's actually go to government. So I'll be voting against the amendment because I think it's just adding further delays, if the truth is told, and something that we do need to move forward on.
Thanks for that. Frank Adlington-Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. As the ward member for Wingerworth, I've seen a whole tirade of unwelcome planning applications and much frustration from residents, and I think I hear that across the chamber today. Many members feeling that same level of frustration. So I'm a little bit unsure as to why, when we have an opportunity in front of us to really try and do something about that, to give power to a scrutiny committee, to write to government, to make sure that we're doing the best we can to serve our residents. Again, we're looking at kicking can into the long grass, we're looking at delays. It just seems again that we're referring and deferring, and this motion itself talks about giving teeth. Well, we're certainly not taking the opportunity today to use the teeth that we do have. I will be voting against the amendment and will be supporting this motion. I think that it's absolutely right that we take this chance, and I think that there's a little bit of, again, I'm ashamed to have to keep saying this again about the council, but I feel that, again, it's becoming political. We're turning something about how things are presented. This council does not, it seems, want to write to government. It wants to shove it down into a scrutiny committee and defer that decision. We should stand up for the residents of North East Derbyshire proudly and loudly. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Mark Foster? Mark?
Thank you, Chair. What I'm concerned about, can you hear me on this? Yeah. What I'm concerned about more than anything is the answer I've heard from the monitoring officer. For me on this, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a solicitor, I know you're looking, but when we look at council therefore resolves 3 to write to government, we either write to them or we don't write to them. And doing the opposite, it negates it quite clearly. Now, if we accept this from as an answer from officers that it doesn't negate it, what this means is if there's any future motions from any party, the answer can be send it to a scrutiny committee. You don't have to actually do whatever it is, send it to a scrutiny committee, and they can say do it later on, and then it gets buried. So if we accept this now, this can be applied to any motion in future. And so I've got to say, I don't accept that view that it negates it. Absolutely not. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. I think now probably come to right of reply by the mover of the amendment. That's Nigel, is it?
I don't know. Do we have to move that we debate
if you wish to have a right to reply, if not,
yeah, I can do that. I think we've had this debate times many about who's driving car. If we're going to do things should go through the scrutiny committees that look and get all the advice. Then they go then that recommendations go to cabinet. The cabinet considers that. That's the model we've got. Because then you get all the advice. It's wrong that the council, just on them ways, are instructed to do stuff. We've got to know all the ins and outs, a bit like Kevin says. We might end up still writing to government, but we'll have a lot more facts and reasons for doing that, not just because somebody's requested it. We need to know all the ins and outs and that. So I'm more than happy with my amendment that, and again, like's been said, you're pushing an open door. We've got as many issues as everybody else, but it's the process how we go about that and achieving that. And we think it's best to, rather than starting from scratch, look at all the ramifications for different things And I suppose just to think, if this council writes to government, do you think it'll make any difference? Whereas if it's gone through scrutiny and you've got some facts and figures at back of that, then you might have more influence. So I'm more than happy to carry on. So I don't know if we have to vote twice. I'll take advice on that. About the recommendation.
I'm advised that as the mover of the main motion, Councillor Clough will have a right to reply on this amendment.
Thank you, Chair. Although I like the amendment, and thank you for that, I have serious concerns that if we don't take up number 3 and write to government and ask for more powers, then I think as a council we're failing our residents. It's a council decision, not a committee decision, to write to government, and I think that we should be writing to government. So on that basis I can't accept the amendment. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for that then. So I think we're going to vote on the amendment now.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a procedural question. Can the council instruct scrutiny to do something? No. Okay, thank you.
I don't think so. No. We're going to vote on the amendment, which is that the council request a relevant scrutiny committee to review the recommendations of the organisation scrutiny committee, which were made in June 2023. That's the amendment. I'm asking you to vote on your...
Plus 1, 2 and 3. Plus 1, 2.
On items 1, 2 and 3.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I'm asking people to vote for or against the amendment that's been moved by Nigel on the machines. Oh, that's great. I can't see my name there. And I have voted. It begins with an S, Smith, but I can't see my name on there. And I have voted.
We'll take a note of that, Chair.
Maybe I'm just...
No, I can't see it either.
Not needed. Anyway, the results looks like the amendment is carried. In which case, I believe the amendment would become the substantive motion, and then the monitoring officer may read it out again, and then we'll have to vote on that as a substantive motion, I believe.
Excuse me a minute. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for time for us to get it right. The amended motion reads that Council resolves to ask the relevant scrutiny committee to review the organisation scrutiny committee's report in June 23 and its implementation from April 2025 to include points 1, 2 and 3.
Thanks for that. So we've got to vote on that. All those in favour of the amended motion that's just been read out?
There we go.
So thanks for that. It appears that the amended motion's been carried by quite a lot and one abstention. Thank you for that. I'm just mindful of the time. I might just I think I'm going to call for a 5-minute break. And we're going to come back and then we're on to probably about the last item, motion B. I'm going to call a 5-minute break. Thank you.
Constitution.
So if Andrew comes in, I think we might all be here who wish to be here. Thank you, Council. So I'll move on to item 13, motion B, proposed by Alex Dale.
Thank you very much, Chair. In the interest of time, I'll try and keep my my opening remarks brief.
Good.
But what I expect in return is the same unanimous result we had in the last motion.
Against.
I'd say that there's lots to say on this issue, and I do genuinely want to take the politics out of it to a degree, and I think the motion rightly highlights that we all have our main priority as district councillors is to represent the interests of the residents of this district. So that comes above politics. So I do want it to be constructive. I think it's undeniable that the budget is going to have significant impacts on our residents. And my view is that our primary role is to represent those residents. And we are on the front line of some of these issues that have been created by the budget. And I was struck in particular I'm struck by the number of business-led organisations who are really highly concerned around the national insurance rises. Particularly the CBI today has been talking quite a lot about it, and the FSB have already. And obviously the farming sort of fraternity, if you like, are very concerned around the impact of the inheritance tax changes, and really interested to see that being voiced locally as well. I attended the meeting at the Casa Hotel a week or two ago. There was about 100 business people and farmers in attendance, and some of the comments there were really, really significant, and the financial impact on some of their businesses, real upset and concern around the loss of their business if they seek to pass them on to children. So it's really clear that those concerns are very real. And from my perspective, the motion is not asking a lot on that respect. It's asking council to seek the views, or a scrutiny committee to seek the views of those businesses and farmers in the district, and to voice that back to the government so that they're clear on the impact of what the budget proposes. And then in relation to the pensioners and the winter fuel allowance, I mentioned we are on the front line here. We are responsible for dealing with some of the consequences of government actions. And just as we did a couple of years ago in terms of the cost of living crisis and all of the work that we did as a district council to try and mitigate that, and I think that was, I'd like to think that was a good piece of cross-party working. We had general support across the council for what we were trying to do. We recognised we weren't in a position to financially support every single person who was struggling, but it was about how we signpost, how we maybe use specific pots of money to try and support certain organisations to try and help as much as we could. So the motion again is seeking to look at ways in which we can support pensioners who've been affected by the winter fuel allowance changes. I won't say any more at this stage. Obviously I'll come back and reply later, but that's the purpose of the motion. It's really about trying to represent people who've been impacted by the budget and ensure that government are aware of those views as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Is it seconded? Do you wish to reserve the right to speak, or do you wish to speak now? Okay. Nigel Barker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Alex. I must admit I expected something along these lines. It's not a surprise. Although I reckon you've used up all your bullets in one go. You've really gone for it, haven't you, there? Thought you might have saved some of them for another meeting. But there you go. I did consider 2 or 3 ways to answer this. I mean, one option was to dispute all the bullet points and make an argument against them. But I think because there are alternative views on all them. For an example, Barrow Hill line, as we've said in past, it were a totally unfunded gimmick to win votes prior to election. And I know this government is looking at other options. And I'm meeting with various people to look at various options around that line and other stuff. I could go on, but we'd be here all day agreeing to disagree, because no matter what I say, you'll disagree with, and it'd be all backwards and forwards till what time do we have to finish? 5 o'clock. Another option is simply state that we've got a new Labour government that's got to make some difficult decisions to start rebuilding our health and social services that the last government broke. So I fully accept you're entitled to disagree with these measures, but to carry on as we were wasn't an option. I take it you would be happy to carry on running down the services that people need. You seem to have done a good job of that at the County Council, Alex. I've got the SEND report here, if you want to read it again. With regards to the resolution to do what's being asked, could and would cost the council thousands of pounds. We don't have the expertise in-house to carry out an assessment of the social, economic and regenerative impact stroke costs of budget measures. That's a massive project. That's a university doctorate.
Yeah.
To do that, we'd need to employ consultants, hence we'd have less money to spend on service delivery, and I think that's all a bit counterproductive. So with all that in mind, and to cut it short, and not to take the politics out on it, we'll be voting against the motion.
Thanks for that. Pam Windley.
No, you can just...
Okay. Yeah, I agree with all this, actually. There's one thing that I would like our district councillors to keep in mind is that the revamping of the day centres, which will be directly due to money, will have an effect on families probably in our district. I know it's not all completed yet, but we must all be mindful on residents who have children or adults with any kind of disability, and they could lose that bit of support which could bring that family into crisis. So we do need to be mindful about what is also coming into our district. So if you could all just keep your noses to the ground, please, any families. I know the autistic side, the children, I see parents all the time asking if there are any clubs, etc. They shouldn't have to be hunting, they should be there. And it'll go, I'm thinking, for right across the board with disabilities. So we all need to be mindful that this needs to be added to this group here as well, because it's coming. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Pam. Frank Adlington Stringer.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Windley, for highlighting what you just have. I'm very proud to come from a party that doesn't whip or tell its representatives how to vote, and I hope that during my time on the council I've always spoken up and called out some of the, well, BS, as I see it, that gets thrown around in the chamber. This motion could have been slimmed down quite a lot. In fact, itself it is almost a university doctorate. I agree with what is trying to be done and said and asked for, and I think it's really important that we do understand the hardship that our residents are facing and be able to respond to that. But to throw in all of this politics is so unhelpful and actually undermines getting that and achieving that for residents, because you know that that's going to get voted down today purely because of all the unnecessary political stuff in there. When we could come back to you and talk about the £33 million black hole at the County Council, the 4.9% tax rise, the £1 million of grants that are going to be slashed to over 30 groups, the 11 care homes cut, the 8 old people's day centres and the 8 centres for autistic and learning disabilities, all of that is being slashed. And the County Council did in itself receive a petition of over 5,000 signatures and decided not to listen to that. So absolutely, I will say there's been 14 years of chaos and that Labour needs to change its tune nationally. That has to change. What we need to do is invest in people, and understanding how to do that through some of this information will be really helpful. But I'm really actually disheartened to see that this isn't going to pass today because of all the rubbish that has been put alongside it. So unnecessary. It doesn't put people of North East Derbyshire first. It's party politics yet again. So I would like to suggest that we scrap all of that, an amendment to Councillor Dale, and we just take the one bullet point and delete the rest. But I'm sure you won't, because you want the headlines. Thank you very much.
Martin Thacker.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I realise from the leader's point of view that it has to say that the government has to make difficult decisions. That's accepted. We've heard all the rhetoric from government, times many over the last few weeks. But my issue, and for all of the councillors in this chamber today, is what do we say to the residents in North East Derbyshire? What do we say to the pensioners and the vulnerable who can't afford to put on heating? What do we say to the charities that are going to struggle with their services because they can't afford the new national insurance contributions, and is going to impact significantly on what they can do to help others in turn? What do we say to the schools where many of us are governors when they're going to struggle with their bottom line of their budgets, again because they can't afford ancillary staff or other things are going to be more money because of this budget? What are we going to say in this rural district that we represent to those farmers who are already living on the breadline and now are going to struggle further? And what about those in our rural communities who are relying on the bus service because they don't have cars? And now this is an extra thing to think about. They're just examples. And what I would like to think as a district council, I personally am not interested in a research project on this. I know from talking to people, real people on the doorsteps and in the communities that we represent, just like you do, what people are saying to us. And it's not about vote winning or whatever. What I'm more concerned about is what are the practical solutions that we can do. We've heard about food banks and the chair's already alluded to what we can do to support local ones. What else can we do as a council to signpost people to help and support and to help them face this uncertain future? I'd like to see pragmatic, practical things being done and officers to give their time to that rather than do anything else. But as I say, Chair, I completely understand where the motion's coming from, but I'd like to turn it into perhaps some practical elements to it so that I can answer residents who come to me and say, help, what am I supposed to do now?
Thanks for that. David Hancock?
Thank you, Chair. I agree 100% with Martin here. I was on here last time when we went through the cost of living crisis, and this council pulled together. I don't care what level of local government you're at or national government, you've always got difficult decisions to make. And right now we've got difficult decisions to make because people here are hurting. And they're hurting because of decisions that have been made that are outside of their control. Last time the parishes helped. This time the parishes are actually being hit by the national insurance increase. And they're being stung in a way that nobody actually saw coming. So whether we've got to find it from somewhere else or not, we need to help. Sometimes that is just pragmatic and opening the doors of this building, providing this building as a warm hub. There's stuff we can do that doesn't necessarily cost thousands of pounds, and we need to be pooling our resources. And I think from what Alex said, I don't want to put words into his mouth, or certainly be rewriting what is here, but I don't think he's on with some massive research project that's going to undertake millions of pounds. He's on about getting a scrutiny committee, which you seem so fond of, to sit and talk and come up with some ideas and actually do something practical. That's what it's asking for, and if you turn this down, you're really showing your own true political colours.
Thanks. Next one's Helen Weatherall.
Leave it green. Yeah. Okay, yeah, totally agree with what's just been said. Just reflect on 14 years of austerity under a Conservative government where vulnerable people suffered horrendously. We've now got a new government, new colour, new administration, and vulnerable people are suffering terribly. It cannot be right. I think it reflects back on my question about what we're here to do, actually. Yeah. And you know, I think the pragmatic solution that Councillor Thacker has mentioned, the stuff that we can do to make a difference, we have to reflect on that. That's what I would want to see in this motion. Thank you.
Thanks. I think I saw Charlotte's name on, but it's disappeared, so I'll go down to the next one I can see, which is Mark Foster. Or Richard Welton.
Yep, okay, thanks. We'll look nothing like it. Yeah, it was just really a bit on the sort of national insurance at a local level. It's actually quite... Oh, is that your point? Was you going to make that point as well? Okay, it's about 1% of the precept or something like that, but you might think it doesn't have an impact, but it does, because it either has an impact in terms of having to put the cost and your charges up, and it does restrict what you can do with your discretionary spend that's not, that's not all allocated. It does, and it also affects local businesses, because the individual people who are self-employed, electricians, the plumbers, the sparkies, what's coming with, it's only just national insurance, but also with the increased employment regulation, is there will be a reluctance to take people on in our local communities, and those local communities will not have the economic growth in the future that will support the council and all the other nice things that we want to do in the public sector. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for that. Mark Foster, I think your name was there, so I'll call you next, sorry.
It won't work. Well, where you got the Ross?
Oh, it doesn't work.
I'm on at the moment.
Right, we better go to Ross then. Yep.
Oh,
sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if you actually remove the political bits out of this, there's a serious point behind the motion, which is for us to look into the social challenges and economic challenges that we are undoubtedly going to face and have probably faced for many years at the moment. I don't think piling more politics on top of politics is helpful. I think our residents want us to be part of the solution and not continuing this same thing of going around in circles and not actually ever achieving anything. During COVID and then the cost of living issues, where we were actually working cross-party, and I thought we were working quite successfully on coming up with ideas, ways to communicate things out to residents, and that was officers, group leaders and the community all chipping in to come up with solutions to those problems. And I think that's what I'm choosing to read, I will say, in this motion, in that I think residents want us to be working together, coming up with these, finding out what the issues are and how it will affect them, and then coming up with ideas to hopefully help them in some way. I know in Tupton we started a clothes bank up, which is loads of people in Tupton have donated loads of clothes. So if people are struggling to buy clothes, they can come and get some clothes for free that are kind of second-hand clothes, and that's proving popular. It's something we shouldn't have to have, but again, these are little projects that are being done at a parish level that are going to have a huge impact on certain families' lives. And I think that's a sort of facilitation this district council can do going forward when these people are struggling. So I think we should let's just remove all the politics out of this and actually get our adult brains engaged just for a minute and actually approve this, even if we have to amend out all the politics in it. I think this should be a piece of work being carried out by officers to understand the level of impact this is going to have in North East Derbyshire.
Thank you for that. Next on the list appears to be Carol Lacey.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to try and answer a couple of questions. And one is, what do we say that Councillor Thacker mentioned? So after 14 years of austerity and services cut to the bone, yes, you're going to listen to this. You're responsible for nursing homes closing at county level. So don't mock me because I want to say something for a change. Yeah, your politics. So, can I finish?
Carry on, Carol.
The disabled and the vulnerable have been hit worse in recent years, not just with this winter fuel allowance. People who were living abroad was getting this winter fuel allowance. People that are richer and have more money were getting this winter fuel allowance, and now you're all up in arms because it's been cut. It's been cut to the people that don't deserve it, and the people that can claim for it should go and try and claim for any benefits that gives them the entitlement to it. But at the end of the day, I can't support this motion because everything that I've just tried to say, you first of all started crying it down without me even saying a word. And secondly, because I just think it's complete party politics from the Tories yet again.
Thanks for that, Carol. Mark Foster.
Apparently I'm logged on.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciated. I'm a bit stunned by that last comment, if I'm honest, and I'd like us all to remember that sentence, being cut to the people that don't deserve it. That's one which we should never forget. apart from that, I'm just a bit stunned with that. 2 points I'd like to touch on. One is the employer's national insurance, and we've spoke about how it will affect, well, we already know how it's going to affect private companies, and it's going to be next year's pay increase for the workers next year. And that's been spoke about a lot, but the point I wanted to touch on is the same that Councillor Welton mentioned, and was also mentioned briefly by Councillor Hancock, and that's how it affects parish councils. Now, I only had the figures today from our town clerk, and it's going to put our payroll up by over 2%. And that money's not coming from anywhere. And payroll is one of the main costs of parish councils, and that's before a pay award, before inflation, and before any rising fuel costs or anything like that. And this will affect all the 24 parish councils that are in North East Derbyshire, and it's going to result in somewhere between a precept increase, unless we make cuts to services. It's going to be a precept increase of between 1.5% and 2%. That's what, and that's before anything else. So that tax, that employers' national insurance grab of £40 billion is coming direct from parish councils. I don't know how that will affect district councils yet, and I don't know how it will affect the county council. But I know already only one thing today, it will affect parish councils. So that's next year's precept. So it's either putting the precept up even more, or it's a cut to services. This is affecting workers direct. So I feel quite strongly about it, and it's not been recognised by a lot of people, apart from 3 people here that have mentioned it. That's one. The other one I wanted to speak about, and we've talked about already, we've spoken about the winter fuel allowance and how that will affect people. Now, I'm one of the people here, and I'm sure there's others, there's one sat behind me already, that have been to fatal incidents where there's been people that have suffered from hypothermia, and people have died where it's been a contributing factor. And I've seen it with my own eyes and dealt with it. And I can promise you that that is the case. When you look at the excess deaths, the excess winter deaths, that's what I'm interested. So next summer, we're going to have a figure, if it's next summer, of excess winter deaths. Now, if you look at those, if it's reckoned to be something like 5,000. So if it's 5,000, if we roughly work it out how many we'd get in North East Derbyshire, it's possibly something like 8. Now, these are 8 people. This is why it's so important. These aren't just 8 deaths. And like we've got deaths on the road in Derbyshire, 40 deaths died last year. They're not figures like that. What's important about these 8 people, about these 5,000 people, is one thing. They're all currently alive. They're all people alive. So they're not just going to, people die every year from hypothermia, and it happens. But these are excess ones caused by a policy that's been brought in. So these 5,000 people are about to die through a policy that's been introduced. They're not dead yet. The excess ones, now, that's worth looking into. If you don't understand that already, look at what Keir Starmer said. Now, I will politicise this, it's been politicised already. Keir Starmer, 2017, said, plans to mean test winter fuel will be the single biggest attack on pensioners in a generation. And the Labour Party said that the increase would be 3,850. That's excess deaths, 3,000. And that was by means testing it. Now, if you remove it altogether, what will the figure be this year? What will it be this year? Because they're still alive currently. There's not dead people we're counting people that are going to die, and they will be there. What I'd say is, look at that next summer, and then look back and see what your policy's done, because the policy belongs to you over there. It's your policy. You can say what you want, but it's your policy and it belongs to you. It's been brought in by a Labour government, and it's clear what it intends to do, and it's clear what it will do. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Jane Barry.
Thank you, Chair. It is very difficult not to politicise something like this. Very difficult. And I have to say, from my work perspective, it's even harder still when we've had to go out and support residents whose families are being turfed out of care homes, whose families are not being given access to day centre care. It goes on and on and on. I can go on about it. If some of the people had listened to some of the demonstrations that took place and the people that were there, who aren't political, these are people that are living the day-to-day. We had one carer come forward who's had to reduce their hours in work in order to take care of their parent who needs daycare that can't get daycare because that daycare centre has now shut. So she's reduced her wage, which has now got an impact on her family. It goes on. It's not just, it affects everybody. And, you know, the winter fuel allowance, yeah, it's not good. I'm not saying it's the best thing Labour have done. However, there are people out there that do not need that winter fuel allowance. I'm one of them. My husband got it. We don't need it. My dad got it. He gets working tax pension credit. But even he said he didn't need it. It's about it being overhauled, and I think we're right, and we've got to look at it and where it goes. And, you know, the Labour aren't going to get things right straight away all the time. It's not going to happen like that. But when I'm sat there and I'm faced on a day-to-day basis with residents in tears because their 100-year-old mother hasn't got a clue where she's going to be living, whether her care home's going to stay open or not. And, you know, so, sorry, Alex. You know, the council have got a lot to do with this. And it's ongoing. Us, as a district council, and you're right, we pulled together last time, and our staff will continue to work with residents to make sure that they're not in that predicament. And we will continue to do that, and I can guarantee the officers will be out there working with people doing that. So I could never support this, whilst I understand some of the sentiment around it. It's very politicised, and you can't get away with that, especially in our local councils. It's heartbreaking when you sit there and you see these people that have got severe learning difficulties or severe health problems, whatever it is, and their families can't get to find a home for them around where they live, and they use public transport to get there, and there's nowhere for them to go. There's no way you can't say that's not political, because it is. But it is something we've got to deal with, and we will continue dealing with it, and we will continue supporting those people out there that have got families that are being hit hard. If you want to talk about being hit hard, you know, so the SEN report's just one other thing that goes on. We've got to look at it as a whole and not try to take the political side out of it, but it's very difficult to do that. And, you know, for this council alone, I can guarantee you, if anybody comes to this council needing help, they will get it. And our officers will make sure that they get that help, wherever they can do that. And, you know, you do need to be pointing people in the direction of welfare rights and where they can go to get support and benefits. And let's not forget, a lot of these benefits have been cut over the years. But there are benefits out there that people can access, but they don't know it's there. And that's our jobs and that of the welfare rights team to keep that going and getting that information out there. So let's try and do something positive about this and move on. Let's not just knock everything. Our council will continue to support its residents, regardless of where you come from and what your background is and whether you've got money or not. That doesn't matter. If you need help, you need help.
Thanks for that, Jane. Stephen Reid. Stephen.
Yeah, I'd say this. I don't want it to be political, but I'll agree with Jane. I don't know how you can remove it. Because it's there in national policies and what either side's doing. Carol, you know me, you're a friend. We get along really, really well. I'm trying to keep anything out of this. I think the challenge is, how do we recognise, because these things are things that I speak to people on a daily basis, they are affecting people. So can we get to something that we can go, look, the NI increase is going to affect the district from an employment standpoint and what we're going to raise in the next 5 years. It's going to have a significant impact. We're going to have a huge challenge that we're dealing with. As people have raised from both sides, yes, the winter fuel allowance, it was always meant to be a temporary measure, whatever the Conservatives claim to be. It was going to be repealed at some time. I don't agree with the way Labor have removed it. That's about as political as I'll get with it. What I would say is we need to do something for the residents. Whether this motion is reworded somehow in the time we have left, I don't know. But I think that the key thing comes back to what Councillor Thacker said. We need to have something that we can say, and we need to be clear. It does need to go to scrutinies. It does need to look at this on a case-by-case and go how these things are affecting our community. How are they affecting our constituents? And what can we do about it properly? As the Leader of the Council sat here not too long ago and said, the right way to make these decisions is to push them back to community and gather all the facts. We need to make sure we get this information, put it together as a council and actually come back to a constituents. And I really couldn't give a toss which party politics we're pushing on this. Let's do the right thing for our constituents. I mean, Labor, half of you on the other side don't agree with half the decisions your national government has made, and sit there trying to defend some of them. I don't agree with half the decisions the 14 years the government made on my side, and I sit there trying to defend some of them. But when they've done something wrong, I put my hand up and say they've done it wrong. Leave the national politics out of it, and let's look at what we can do as a district council and district councillors to say, this isn't the best situation that we're currently in. What can we do to help? So I agree with Jane's comments along those lines, and a lot of the other comments that have been raised over this side, most of which, by the way, haven't been raised by Conservatives, but have been raised by all the other members. So thank you.
Thanks for that. I think there's nobody with the name down to speak. Does Charlotte want to come in as you or come back to Alex?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just try and touch on a few of the points made, and again, I'll try not to prolong it too long. The reference that Nigel made to it being some sort of research project, that's not what it is at all. This is an assessment, and this is kind of the work that officers are supposed to do. You know, the officers are supposed to be looking out for government changes to policy and informing members about the impact of those changes, both on the council and on our residents. I dispute that idea that it's some sort of university research project. Yeah. It's essentially a part of the role that I would expect Jane and others within the finance team and other directors to be doing anyway, because I think that's just part of their role. And I think the first part of that is to state some of the things that have happened, and that's what the motion does in the notes section, and I accept that there's some criticism of that. But really, I don't think that the notes section of this report is political. It lists a series of factual statements. I don't think anyone can dispute any of those things are actually what's happened. And so I think that's important that we do get that across, and obviously setting the parameters of where we are at the moment, having had the first 4 months of a Labour administration, these are some of the things that we need to highlight. The infrastructure, for example, the school that's under threat at the minute, the avenue and the railway funding. This is a budget that increased taxation by 40 billion and borrowing by 70 billion, and yet is cutting at the same time essential infrastructure projects that could make a massive difference to North East Derbyshire. So I think it's right that we highlight those, because that does matter. You know, it's amazing to me that the council wouldn't want to have a view on the scrapping of the Barrow Hill line. That could have been absolutely, transformational for our district, and yet for some reason we just don't want to discuss it. We don't want to have that conversation. I think moving on in terms of there was a few comments around the need for pragmatic action. I accept the resolution to this may not be the best worded, but I think that's broadly what we were trying to achieve. We want to get around the table and talk about how we can try and have an impact as a district council in a similar vein to what we did in previous years around COVID and the cost of living crisis. So that's certainly what we're trying to achieve. In terms of the reference to the winter fuel payment and the pensioners around not deserving it, I mean, the government's data suggests 100,000 pensioners will be pushed into poverty as a result of it, and I think that's the group that don't deserve it, if you ask me. And I think just the broader points, we talked earlier about turnout in elections, and I think it's worth highlighting that 82% of the electorate didn't vote for this Labour government. So they may have a mandate, but at the end of the day, 82% didn't vote for them. There's already a petition growing for 2 million signatures calling for a general election. There's a lot of people that we're speaking to that are having buyer's remorse, for want of a better phrase. And it doesn't help when Labour consistently break promises to farmers, to pensioners, promises around promoting growth, but at the same time massively increasing taxes on businesses, talking about a fictional black hole of 22 billion that they never will publish the figures or the breakdown of, so no one knows where it comes from. And no taxes on working people. Well, national insurance contributions on employers is an indirect tax on working people, because it may cost them their jobs and it may cost them their wages. So I think, there's a lot of politics in this, and I agree it's very difficult to make this unpolitical, but I think that the motion as it stands is an attempt to try and get across what the issues are and try and find a way forward for the district council to try and work with our residents to reflect those views back to government and to try and work through some of the issues and help them.
Thanks very much for that, and the debate. It's been quite wide-ranging. The only thing I can say is I think we're all sitting in here because we do care about representing to the people out there one way or another, or we wouldn't be bothering to come in and give our time. So I'm going to move to the vote on this motion then proposed by Alex, and it's in front of you. So I'm going to ask you to use your machines and vote for or against the motion. So have we all managed to vote there?
Yours is still missing, Christine.
Yeah, it is.
No, I don't know which.
No.